Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We're going to be getting started momentarily. Thanks for your patience.
Momentarily, so you can keep talking amongst yourselves.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for taking time out of this beautiful weekend to join us today here at St. Martin's Church. We are missing a few folks, so we're going to just get started as is. So we appreciate your patience while we're getting set up, and I'm just going to briefly just give an overview of what we're going to be, what we have in store for you all today. So first, we're just going to have a little bit of intros, and I'm going to be handing it over to Zach Sharif, the co-director of the Bloomingdale Village Square Initiative. And then it will come to me. I'm the chair of the North Capitol Deckover Steering Committee for some introductions, and then we're going to get right into presentations. I'm going to kick it off with a 10-minute presentation on the historical background of North Capitol Street and how we got to what we have today. I'll be handing it over to Sandrine Bukersh, who's going to be covering urban environment and quality of life. Then we will have Bertha Holliday, who will be talking about the physical, economic, and social impact and ramifications of what North Capitol is today. And then we're going to hand it over to Thaddeus Taylor, who's going to give an overview of the North Capitol Deckover Initiative. Then we're going to roll into a community engagement section, so basically a Q&A, and we will have a survey for everyone to complete. So please, that's a critical element. We are all about your feedback and your input into what we're doing. It's how we've gotten to where we are today. It's how it's what will shape where we go, and that's it's a major cornerstone of who we are as a multi-community, multi-neighborhood organization. So I'm going to hand it over to Zach Sharif for an introduction. Thank you, everybody.
Hi, everybody. Thank you all for joining us today. Thank you for being with us in-house, and thank you for those joining us virtually. We really appreciate your time today. And thank you to Paul Zelker from Spark Street Digital for streaming us live. And thank you so much, Paul. I'd also like to thank our amazing all-volunteer steering committee, some of who are not quite here yet, but we had some technical issues with some slide presentations, which they're trying to clear up at home, and will be joining us shortly. But I'd like to thank our all-volunteer steering committee, all passionate grassroots folks who, as a team, have brought us to where we are today, on the horizon of a new reality for the iconic North Capitol Street. This steering committee is comprised of people from the surrounding neighborhoods of North Capitol Street, and we've really tried to reach out to all the abutting neighborhoods to get as much feedback and participation from everyone, so it's a cohesive and inclusive vision for North Capitol and our Deckover project. As you all know, North Capitol is a major DC artery with an amazing view of the Capitol building. North Capitol Street was also once a beautiful tree-lined boulevard, although you really wouldn't know it today. Really, the only thing that's left that's beautiful is the view of the Capitol building. Trams actually used to run by beautiful Victorian homes with lovely pruned front yard gardens. It was charming. It's not so charming anymore, as you can see. In fact, it's a hideous mess, a major safety hazard, a polluting, noisy, filthy, and hideously ugly highway with submerged underpasses that create an overwhelming chasm, a pit literally filled with noise, air pollution, fumes, and soot. But North Capitol will once again become a beautiful boulevard, but we need your support. It'll not only become a beautiful boulevard, but a lot more in this stretch of Bloomingdale and Eckington. A park, a place to play, a place to enjoy, where your laughter can be heard, a place to sing and dance, a place to hear live music in an amphitheater and watch children play in the water feature, a place to stretch and exercise, a place to connect, to reconnect, and build stronger communities. Placemaking, which is one of the core tenets of the Bloomingdale Village Square Initiative, is one of the steering committee's primary objectives. Our vision of North Capitol is a place that functions for its residents, adds to the quality of life, and that suits our residential neighborhoods, suits our neighborhoods on a human scale, a scale that's appropriate for our 3-story homes, not a scale that's appropriate for NOMA, high-risers, or 8th Street. This team has a real vision for North Capitol Street, a vision that you've all helped us build over our past 3 community forums. A vision we ask you again to help us strengthen and further define with your input. There's only one vision for the future of North Capitol Street, and that vision is to deck over this atrocity that currently exists, to reconceptualize and reimagine this iconic street and bring it into the 21st century, to humanize it, to green it, to scale it to our proportions as a residential area and re-envision it to address the issues that matter to our community, our safety, our health, and our quality of life. Our vision is feasible, our vision is studied, and with the generous assistance of ZGF architects, who are currently now doing the deck over at DuPont Circle, our vision is rational, our vision is sane and humane, addressing the noise, pollution, and safety in our communities and rebuilding a sense of community is what this project is all about. We don't need a highway ravaging our neighborhoods, jeopardizing our mental and physical health and that of the future generations to come. We never needed a highway. It was imposed on us for suburban commuters coming into the city in the early 60s. And this imposition, this major injustice in history, this racist highway must be decked over and this history corrected. Cap the gap is our little slogan for this project. We don't need this highway. We don't want this highway. The surveys from the past 3 community outreach forums have overwhelmingly supported the deck over park. We don't want or need any more variations of highways going forward. Highways simply don't work in residential neighborhoods. The science proves it. The urban planners have told us so. The trends across the country and the world have shown us so. The future is in decking over highways, not recreating them. So don't be fooled by other proposed plans. They're just token gestures. And don't compromise for little slivers of pocket parks. That just doesn't cut it for Bloomingdale or Eckington. Don't be dictated to by pushy people flaunting half-baked invasive ideas with justifications of safety. Safety today is a much broader discussion and one that will be thoroughly studied by DDOT professionally. So, in conclusion, we have a great team, all with fantastic specialties and knowledge. And if at the end of our presentation today you support us, please sign our petition online, show us your support, because the more signatures we have, the stronger an argument we have with GDOT to really create a beautiful green space here instead of dealing with a polluting, nasty, filthy highway. And with that, I'll pass it back to Paul, our chair.
Thank you, Zach. I'd like to introduce Terry Janine Quinn, the president of the Bloomingdale Civic Association. Perfect timing, too.
Hi, thank you all for coming. Thank you. Thank you all for coming out today. I was, as everyone is, concerned about, just how we're going to do this in COVID. So I rushed and bought some N95s, and I lasted about 4 minutes in here in it. It's about to suffocate me. So I'm here to talk about, I think, 3 things in particular. 1 is how Bloomingdale got involved in this project. 2 is what I'm doing here. And 3 is why we think you ought to be involved. So the idea of decking over North Capitol is not a new one. And I wish I could say for sure that Bloomingdale started it, but I'm not even sure of that. What we've learned as we've been working on this is that years ago, we believe in the 80s, there was a first iteration of this idea. And for reasons unknown, it was not successful. And we were stuck with the highway and dangerous conditions that we see outside today. I've been president of the Civic Association, gosh, at this point I believe this is my 12th year. And early on in my presidency, I encountered this idea of decking over North Capitol. It wasn't my idea, I can't claim that. It came up in the context of one of our safety discussions around North Capitol. And if I recall correctly, I believe it was about North Capitol and Florida Avenue, which is always a troubling spot. And someone brought up this idea, well, it would be great if we could just cover North Capitol and create a park. And I thought it was a brilliant idea. And over the years, I have come to know this community. And in this moment, I'm speaking specifically of Bloomingdale because that's where my experience is primarily, as one that is bold, that is audacious, that is willing to dream big. And with that behind me, I thought, this is something I can latch on to. I thought it was a fantastic idea. So around 2013, when I was approached to participate in the small area plan on the advisory committee, They wanted me to be a member of it. And at the time, I had a lot of community commitments, and I said to them, the only way I will participate is if we will have a serious conversation about decking over North Capitol. So I joined. We had the conversation. It wasn't always easy, but we got through it. And at the end, we ended up with a report that included the deck over. And what we learned at the end of the small area plan is something that I think a lot of communities don't really pick up on when they go through something like this. And that is that the small area plan, which is backed by the Office of Planning, really lays out kind of a vision of what could happen in a community. But that's it. Nothing really happens after that. What they're looking for is the community to pick up the baton and push it forward. So if you don't do that part, you end up with nothing. Let me not exaggerate that. There are some kind of shorter term things that will usually come out of these reports that they will initiate on their own. But for these big vision items, you really have to push that forward yourself as a community. So once we learned that, we began the process of figuring out how do you do that? What are all the steps? What are the boxes we need to check? And this has been a long road. I mean, that report came out in 2014, and we're 7 years later just now getting to this point. So someone else will talk about all that happened between 2014 and now, but I will tell you that the Bloomingdale Civic Association looked at that and looked at the idea of the deck over and said, we're not going to be able to do this just by osmosis. We've got to get a team together. And Zach and Bertha Holliday, who I'm sure is on her way, they got together and began a committee under the Civic Association, which is called the Bloomingdale Village Square. And it looked at not only the deck over as an idea, but it was primarily focused on how do we interpret the vision that is laid out in the small area plan as a really specific vision for Bloomingdale. How do we put our own take on this and talk to our community and figure out what they would like to see in their community? And so you can go to our website and learn a lot more about the Bloomingdale Village Square and all of the things that were incorporated as part of that project. But one of the elements of that was looking into how it's possible to move this forward. So, as I mentioned, I had been involved at the very beginning. Once I saw this was really beginning to get some steam behind it, I said, well, wait, this might be a real thing. Let's do it. And teamed up with these wonderful guys. And I want to give you a little bit more of a sense of what the steering committee has been doing, particularly over the last, 9 months. I'm not really sure what happened at the turn of the year, but it's like a fire was lit, and we really dug our feet in, put our heads down, and got going. And what I mean by got going is that just about every Sunday, we have been meeting for, we keep saying it's an hour, but it's really 2 hours. And I'm talking about the Sunday meetings, but then there are the meetings within the week. There are these community meetings. And like I said, someone else will get into the details of where we've been pitching this message, where we've been getting community input and all of those things. But I want you to understand that this is a group of not just folks from Bloomingdale at this point. We now have folks from other communities as well, and we're looking forward to adding even more communities to help with this ultimate vision. So the thing is well on its way. So I think it's important for me to be really clear about why I am still involved, because as president, this is not something I have to do. I don't have to get up every Sunday. I don't have to be here today. But the reason why I'm here is, one, I believe in the idea. I think it would be great for our community for safety reasons as a starting point, but I think also the idea of being able to create this connection between the communities and creating a new space where we can really appreciate this incredible view of the Capitol, but also build connections across North Capitol. That's really important to me. The last point I want to make about why I'm here and why I've been so involved in this is because when communities work on something like this, I often see that people like me, and in this instance, I specifically mean people of color and specifically Black people, often feel left out of the conversation. And not just feel left out of the conversation, but often we are left out of the conversation. And what is delivered to us is an already baked plan. And it is kind of pitched as, well, tell us, it's pitched as if we have an opportunity for input, but that input is really kind of on the surface because the idea is already fully baked in. And the whole time that I've been president, that's been one of the things that's been top of mind for me, no matter what we're doing, is how do we fight that? And I don't mean just like fight it when we see it, but how do we fight it on the front end in terms of being more inclusive from the very beginning? And it is hard to be more inclusive when the folks who are inviting you to participate don't have any connection to you. And so that was very, very important to me. And it's important not just that people feel that they have a seat at the table, but that on the back end, when we're on this side of the table, that I am here to make sure that all of the different feedback that we get is actually being heard. Not every idea is going to win, but I think it's important to have people from different backgrounds. We've got to have older people. We've got to have people of different abilities, parents, non-people who don't have kids. Everybody who makes up our community needs to be involved in these big ticket items, and they need to be involved early. And it's not always an easy thing to do, to get people to come out on a Saturday like today. I think one of the things that we've learned over the last couple of years is how important it is you spend your time smartly and on things that are really important to you. So when I see that you guys have come out in what is still a pandemic to spend this much time of your Saturday with us, I think it really reiterates what I already know about our community. And in this instance, I'm talking about not just Bloomingdale, but just this entire area, the ANC 5E area in particular, that we are a people who care deeply about what's going on in our community. And that gives me the confidence to know that as we go through these conversations, I expect that we'll have this kind of participation and more going forward. And I just want you to know that we're listening. We welcome your ideas. Nothing is final. We've got what I think is a great idea, but the whole point of being here is so you can understand where we are, what we've done to date, and how you can participate going forward. So I'm sure I've spent more than a lot of time I had, so I'll pass it on to Paul.
Thank you so much, TJ. I'd just like to make a brief announcement. Just for the folks that are joining us virtually, please take a moment to put in any questions into the chat feature. So that is really important. We'd love to hear your feedback. So for all you joining us virtually, please use the chat feature anytime to put your questions in. We'll have somebody that's going to be collecting them. And for all the folks here, please jot down questions. We do have a robust Q&A segment for the latter part of the community forum. So if you have anything that you catch anything that you would like to circle back to, please jot it down, and we'll address it during the Q&A segment. With that, I'm going to hand it over to myself. I'm up next. So I'm going to bear with me one sec. All right, thanks everybody. All right, so it's really important, I feel, and I'm somebody who's really passionate about history. Just growing up, I've always been curious about history and always reading history, and I always wondered after moving here 11 years ago, like, how did we get this highway that was here? How did this happen? I was already looking to do house history for my own home, and then I started researching Bloomingdale, and then that just spilled into North Capitol Street. And for us, and for what we're looking to do in trying to reshape North Capitol Street, it's really important to understand that history and know that history, because without that, really, you don't know. You can never really have a future, right, if you don't know the past. And you can very often end up with a misguided solution for what is really a big problem for this area of DC. So I'm just going to kick it off with, so what is just a little bit of background on North Capitol Street. And North Capitol Street is one of the original historic streets of the L'Enfant Plan. And the L'Enfant Plan was the original blueprint for Washington, D.C. George Washington chose his major, Pierre L'Enfant, to come up with an urban design for this new capital city. And North Capitol Street there is highlighted in red. It emanates directly north from the Capitol building. Next slide. So North Capitol Street is also historic in that it was the site of the first electric streetcar in Washington, D.C. And why is that important? The electric streetcar, the arrival of the electric streetcar, is what gave birth to this neighborhood and all the other outer neighborhoods across D.C. It allowed people to be able to commute in quickly from these new areas into the center of the city. Without the streetcar, the electric streetcar, Bloomingdale wouldn't exist, Eckington wouldn't have existed when they were developed. As DC was developing, it was growing really rapidly, and as Bloomingdale was being built, the developers, there were major developers here, and they're all competing with each other, and it was like a major land rush. And these developers were using what were racial covenants on the deeds of the homes as a way of having a leg up on other developers. So there was one that was prolific in Bloomingdale. They were called Medog and Shannon. And they put on the deed of the house as it was built that only whites could buy that house in perpetuity. And it was a way of advertising the home as a marketing tool to signify that this was going to be a whites-only neighborhood. And what happened, you had an African-American neighborhood that was very close by called Howardtown. African-Americans were buying into LaDroit Park at the turn of the century, 1900, in the early 1900s. And they saw this beautiful new neighborhood that was being built called Bloomingdale with all these conveniences and all these modern homes. African Americans at that time as well, you had the arrival of moneyed African Americans. The rise of the African American middle class and upper class was here. And African Americans could buy a large 3-story townhouse. They could buy a house in Bloomingdale. But the problem was there were deeds on the homes that prevented them, the covenant that prevented them, that was shutting them out. And in Bloomingdale, you had the first challenge to an African American to a racial covenant on a home was Harrison versus Smith, and that was in 1907. It was the first documented challenge to racial covenant in the District of Columbia. Following that, the whites that lived in Bloomingdale started organizing petition drives to get all the other homes that didn't have covenants on them to have them placed on the deed. So then you had these homes that had original developer covenants and then petition covenants. And this became an annual petition drive to get homes signed on to these racial covenants that specified whites only. In the 1930s, you had the the citizens associations that were also leading the effort to widen North Capitol Street, and you had the first documented case of the Citizens Association looking for a widening of North Capitol Street and also utilizing underpasses and overpasses for a future transformation of North Capitol Street. But a significant milestone that arrived was the 1940s. You had two legal cases in Bloomingdale. You had Duffy versus Mcrae and Duffy versus Matthews, both here on T Street. And they were significant because they failed. And the African Americans who were being sued by their white neighbors to prevent them from taking occupancy of their house were able to move in. And what did that mean? It meant that the racial dividing line in Bloomingdale was moving now from First Street eastward towards North Capitol Street. And this really then marks a major milestone. During the 1940s, the Citizens Association was pushing forth a transformation of North Capitol Street, and you had the whites-only president of the Citizens Association who lived on North Capitol Street at 1921 North Capitol Street, facing it, and leading the effort to transform North Capitol. In 1948, you had another major milestone, which was the Heard versus Hodge Supreme Court ruling that finally struck down racial covenants in real estate contracts forever. It's a Supreme Court ruling known as Shelley versus Kramer. But a sub-case that was part of it was Heard versus Hodge, based out of 116 Bryant Street. And that was a milestone event. From there, you had an acceleration of the development of North Capitol Street. If you go to the next slide, you'll start seeing a sequence of changes. All of a sudden, in 1947, you had the dismantlement and demolishing of Truxton Circle. The Supreme Court ruling Heard versus Hodge, which I mentioned. And next slide. I just will point out just some before and after photos. So here you can see this, the front of this church, and it was a two-tier staircase with a wide sidewalk that led down to a quiet North Capitol Street. It was a local boulevard at that point. Next slide. In 1950, you had the acceleration of the development of North Capitol Street. Key things here on this slide are in the center. I've circled the condemnation announcements of land for the widening of North Capitol Street and the extension of North Capitol Street through Soldiers Home. And that's a critical thing in understanding how we got here, because not only were they looking to widen North Capitol Street and then target these underpasses, but they were also extending North Capitol Street to the outer boroughs, so Maryland. This was permanently transforming the essence of what North Capitol Street was, from a local boulevard to a thoroughfare for commuters to come in and out of the center of the city, permanently changing the dynamic of the traffic, right? It's a critical element. Here you see just a shot of the North Capitol Rhode Island intersection. And this is also a really interesting shot. So in the center there, you can see that North Capitol Street ended at Michigan Avenue. In the distance, you could see trees, and those trees actually are thinned out. Why? This is the early 1950s, because they already started building the interchange, the highway interchange at Irving Street. And here's a photo of that interchange almost nearing completion in 1957. And then here you see what followed, right? All the homes on North Capitol Street lost their front yards. You see a 6-lane highway, basically. One interesting thing just back over there, I'll point out, the staircase, one of the original staircases leading up to the McMillan Park. Keep going, next slide. Here you see what really transformed what North Capitol meant for either side of the street, right? Really, there was no longer a connection between the residential areas, and these underpasses were targeted where the residential areas were. And why is that? Because at that point, when they were making the decision to build these underpasses and this highway, east of North Capitol was still white. West of North Capitol, where we are, was now majority African American. And these folks that were making these decisions were still the white folks that were running the District of Columbia at that time. Here you'll see just another shot of the resulting widening and highwayization of North Capitol Street. Next shot. This is what we have today, right? It's a traffic-clogged highway, right? Bringing that to surface would mean having that traffic at surface, because it's a highway that goes to Maryland, and it's primarily used by commuters coming in and out of the city. It's no longer a local boulevard, which it was in the 1940s. Key things I just want to leave you all with, and I'll be handing it over to Sandrine. What happened with the arrival of what we have today? We have physical division of communities, separation of neighbors, the prioritization of commuters. It's no longer pedestrian friendly, and the creation of an economic void and health and environmental hazards. So we're going to go to Sandrine now. So next I'm going to be handing it over to Sandrine Bukersh, who's going to be covering urban environment and quality of life. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Paul. Hi, everyone. I'm Sandrine Bukersh. I live in Eckington. Actually, I live on North Capitol in Eckington. And I'm the environment liaison on the NCDO, the North Capitol Deckover Steering Committee. It's my pleasure to be here today. I'm going to present key urban environmental considerations and how this vision, the North Capitol Deckover project, puts quality of life for people who actually live here at the core of its vision. Next slide, please. So many of you know North Capitol Street very well. In effect, it's a highway cutting through our residential neighborhoods. I'm not going to repeat what Paul said, but I did want to note that there are currently 8 lanes of asphalt, 6 for moving vehicles and 2 for parked vehicles, tiny sidewalks, and little amount of greenery. Urban heat and floods are important environmental issues that affect human health and quality of life. As you can see in the figure on the left-hand side, urban centers are warmer than the surrounding rural areas. And this is due to what is known as the urban heat island effect. Asphalt and concrete absorb heat and then re-emit it, making it hotter during the day as well as hotter during the night. This urban heat island is also affected by factors such as the city geometry, how natural winds flow through it, waste heat from motors and engines from cars, other human activities, and most importantly, the amount of greenery and vegetation. On the right-hand side of the slide, you can see that vegetation and water provide significant natural cooling by absorbing and retaining heat. Next slide, please. This is what urban heat island looks like visually. Where it's green, it's cool, the blue areas. Where there's asphalt or concrete, it's hot, actually almost twice as hot on the surface. It's the difference between standing in the middle of an asphalt-surfaced parking lot in the middle of a hot summer's day versus standing in a green tree-lined space. And the difference in the heat can be massive, somewhere between 20 to 45 degrees Fahrenheit. So if it's 80 degrees in a green urban space, it may be as much as 125 degrees Fahrenheit in asphalt and concrete surfaced areas. Next slide. This matters because heat is a killer. we saw this year record temperatures and flooding in US cities that were ill-prepared. This led to hundreds of lives lost, loss of infrastructure, and loss of working hours and productivity. When it's 118 degrees outside, such as Palm Springs, it puts people's health in jeopardy, especially the elderly, children, people with pre-existing health conditions, and poor people. At the micro level, studies show that in the US, there's also a racial gap in terms of exposure to heat island. Wealthier neighbors tend to have lots of vegetation and natural cooling. Poorer areas tend to have more asphalt and concrete and less access to green, connected spaces that provide natural breezes and cooling. On top of all of this, going forward, science is showing that we can expect more extreme and more frequent heat, as well as rain events, and the urban heat island effect will exacerbate this issue. Next slide. The good news is that there are strategies to reduce this urban heat island effect, and many of these are showcased in this slide. Most of these involve lots of green spaces, shading, and the use of light-colored surface materials, as well as promoting enhanced wind flow and connected networks of vegetation to keep people in the city more cool. Next slide. Air pollution is another important environmental element that affects human health and quality of life. Worldwide, air pollution accounts for about 7 million premature deaths per year. And I say per year, that's more than the deaths that have occurred in COVID for the past 2 years. In the US, this is estimated at 100,000 premature deaths per year, which is equivalent to the number of deaths due to car crashes. As with the urban heat islands, studies show that there is also a racial gap between those who cause air pollution and those who breathe it locally. And in Washington, D.C., the main source of this air pollution is motor vehicles. Next slide. There are strategies to reduce urban air pollution as well, and these can be quite complex at the policy level. But in the case of North Capitol Street, things are pointing to a net gross increase in surface traffic. So we see 3 key opportunities to address this through design, not policy. First, encourage local residents to walk, bike, and take the bus instead of the car as an ideal. Second, put the interstate commuters into an underground tunnel where air pollution can be contained and filtered. And third, above ground, increase the surface area of trees and vegetation that absorb air pollution as well as heat and as well as wastewater. So plants actually act as natural air filters. They breathe in carbon dioxide as well as air pollution, and they spit out clean oxygen. And so they naturally filter the air. Next slide. Urban noise pollution. So this is another important environmental element that affects human health and the quality of life for the people that live here. So consider, for example, the sound of traffic, honking, motorbikes, trucks, sirens. Now consider the peaceful rustle of leaves and birds in a green space. Noise pollution can be dangerous for health and welfare. And so there are local and national standards and laws specifically on that. In DC, for example, they set 55 decibels at night to be generally okay so that people can sleep. For vehicles, DC sets 83 decibels for vehicles. It should not exceed 83 decibels. For comparison, a jet plane taking off is about 100 decibels. I live directly on North Capitol, and noise is a major problem. I wanted to get a sense of the data on this, so I downloaded an app that measures decibels, and in one occurrence, I recorded this. The maximum was 96 decibels. So remember, jet plane is 100 decibels, DC limits to 83, and this is 96. Next slide, please. Tunnels that completely enclose a road space can reduce noise emission in the neighboring residential areas to practically zero. The sound waves emitted by vehicles cannot penetrate solid concrete walls and soil backfill. This was a quote taken from the lead engineer of the city of Hamburg, who actually capped over a road tunnel. Next slide. So what's great about this NCDO, the North Capitol Deckover vision, is that it's really a win-win for everyone. It puts the commuter cars from Maryland driving through the city, as well as the waste heat, the air pollution, and the noise from the vehicles underground. Above ground, it focuses on the people actually living here, as well as local mobility, with large green spaces to absorb heat, absorb pollution, as well as rainwater. Next slide. It would also help people and cyclists and local mobility enjoy their outdoor journey through a connected network of green, cool shaded areas for different activities. So we have here a map of the different parks. We have Crispus Attucks, which is a privately owned park. We've got the North Capitol Deckover Park, which would focus on kind of national and historic and symbolic significance. There's the Harry Thomas Recreation Area that is an opportunity for sports and physical activities, and there's $19 million in the budget for this fiscal year to improve it even more. We've got the recently finished Alethea Tanner Park, which has a lot of culture, arts, and music activities. And then there's this potential idea of a green space further down North Capitol near the Lincoln and Quincy intersection. So, in conclusion, at the end of the day, what we're proposing here is to take a highway that has 8 lanes of asphalt and turn it into a green park that improves the urban environment and the quality of life for the people that live here, and to put the commuters underground. A win-win approach that you will see is being taken up by cities across the nation and the world in some of the next presentations. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sandrine. Next up, I'd like to introduce Dr. Bertha Holliday, First Vice President of the Bloomingdale Civic Association and co-director of the Bloomingdale Village Square Initiative. Bertha.
Okay, thank you. Unfortunately, I was trying to be smart and decided to add my presentation to Sandrine's because I knew I was following her, and that way, if she forgot her presentation, I'd have it for her. However, I didn't realize her presentation was on Apple, and mine is not, and so I had problems with saving the file and transmitting the file. But I do have the presentation. I just cannot show the presentation, okay? The title of the presentation is, let me run down here and see what the title of the presentation is. Here it is. The Impact of North Capitol Underpasses and a Tale of Injustice, okay? Basically, what we have here, I'm not good with electronics. Okay. In doing this presentation, I was trying to figure out, well, how do I kind of tie all this social justice stuff together? And basically, I came back to basics. What is a social justice perspective of roads, okay? And here we're talking about transportation equity. And it seems to me that transportation equity basically focuses on issues related to the amount, cost, frequency, access, and overall quality of movement. The transportation basically involves the movement of people, the movement of goods. And so in terms of a notion of equity, one might ask questions such as, do different populations have similar access to transportation and its associated goods? or do they not have similar access? Roads are critical components of transportation, and therefore, when we start talking about investment in roads, it seems that we must also include in that analysis an assessment of roads' impact on related social justice concerns. So, for the purposes of this presentation, the main thing that we want to cover is to provide a rationale for support of an investment in a North Capitol Street deckover that is based on a social justice assessment of three major things, and that would be environmental justice, social and racial justice, and third, economic justice. The other thing that I would like to try to cover is to describe the North Capitol Deckover Steering Committee's related strengths on this topic. Okay, in terms of environment, I'm not going to spend hardly any time on environmental justice because Sandrine has done a great job on that, but I do want to just underscore some of the points she made in terms of what are the sources of environmental justice on North Capitol. And those are urban heat islands, increased air pollution, primarily from vehicles, increased noise and sounds, and increased loss of green space. In terms of North Capitol's impact on social and racial injustice, I think Paul has already clearly made the point that one of the impacts was that the deckover in part was built as a means of promoting segregated housing, especially between the east side, which was at the time primarily white residents, and the west side, which at the time was primarily black residents. In terms of other social and racial injustices promoted by the building of the underpasses, it affected people's sense of place and their sense of community identity. When the streets were widened, as Paul pointed out, there was a government takeover, I guess now we call it eminent domain, in terms of taking a lot of people's front yards. There was a turning and modification of many homes' front exterior stairs, if you've noticed that. There was a change in streetscape because, they needed more land for the road. And all of these type of changes resulted in a different look and a different feel of North Capitol and impacted people's sense of place. There also were physical changes to the North Capitol. These types of physical changes, coupled with demographic and social changes, including increased crime, resulted in reductions in neighborhood community identity, that people just didn't feel as attached to the neighborhood as they had before. Now, in terms of its impact on economic injustice, first of all, the deckover was a main source of blight. Many of the neighborhoods directly abutting North Capitol became blighted neighborhoods. Why? Because of the increase in noise, pollution, and trash. Also, the deckover resulted in an increase in vacant homes and street front buildings. Why is that? People didn't want to live right across the street from all that noise. So you started progressively seeing residents of neighborhoods abutting the deckover relocating to Maryland and Virginia. There was also a decrease in home ownership and value of land because of the deckover, not because of the deckover, but because of the underpasses, because they were quite unattractive and quite noisy. The second type of economic injustice that resulted was in terms of neighborhood disinvestment. Both D.C. and the federal government disinvested in this part of the city. They reduced neighborhood banks, for example, and mortgage companies reduced investments, and the city reduced its services and its investment in the North Capitol area. There was also the increase in steering by realtors and redlining by banks. That also served as a means of promoting disinvestment. And finally, as I mentioned before, there was a relocation of many residents. Now, how has the North Capitol Deckover Steering Committee responded to this notion of injustice? And how are we responding? I think, first of all, what I tried to do was kind of identify what I considered 6 strengths of the committee's approach to the North Capitol and its proposal for the North Capitol Deckover. First of all, the steering committee is intentionally a grassroots, multi-neighborhood effort that was authorized by the Bloomingdale Civic Association. Okay, and current membership on that committee includes people from Bloomingdale, Eckington, and Stronghold. We have reached out to a total of 7 civic associations in the area to get them to designate a member of the steering committee, and we will continue that reach out. Another strength is that I think the Deckover Committee is interesting insofar as it has a emphasis on balancing issues related to the quality of life with engineering issues. That typically the engineering, when you're talking about building a road, the engineering issues are probably, 80-90% of what's talked about, okay? But we have been fairly insistent in saying that, no, you got to also talk about the quality of life, because we have this history and we know how a road, and North Capitol in particular, can impact people and impact the neighborhood, impact its economy, et cetera, et cetera. The third strength is that we are committed to neighborhood improvements on both sides of North Capitol Street. That's part of our kind of inclusion approach. And one of the ways that we've demonstrated that is that in addition to the Deckover, we also have what's called a streetscape area. That area, as proposed, will run from about V Street to Florida Avenue and from 1st Street Northwest to Lincoln Road Northeast. And the idea is to really fix up the streetscape of that area and to also promote in the streetscape area increased small business growth and development. And Thaddeus, I think, will talk a little bit more about this, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that. Okay, and the other things that we're doing in terms of development or improvements on both sides is well, that's basically it. Also the Deckover itself, and making sure that Deckover is environmentally responsive. Okay, and where am I? I'm way down here. Okay, thank you. Okay, number 4 is creating a well-designed, activated neighborhood park with a neighborhood history theme, including amenities desired by neighborhood residents, area residents, and we have come up with what those amenities are in terms of being desired by area residents, based on the results and evaluations of 4 previous multi-neighborhood forums. We'll have an evaluation for today. And again, we want you to fill that out because it's an important way for us to know whether we're headed in the right direction. Another strength is that our deck over and streetscape proposal is consistent with the DC Comprehensive Plan, with DC and U.S. policy, and with current national and international practice. And again, Thaddeus will go into more detail about that. And finally, we are committed to fostering the empowerment and the collaboration and the engagement of 7 neighborhoods in the Mid-City East area. That's Bates, Truxton Circle, Bloomingdale, Eckington, Edgewood, Hanover area, and LaDroit Park and Stronghold. And we are trying to foster that empowerment and collaboration and engagement relative to neighborhood improvement efforts, and we are seeking to encourage people in these various neighborhoods to become engaged in the deck over area and to fashion some type of coherent, workable plan for meeting the varying needs of neighborhoods. We believe that what we want, another neighborhood may not want, but that we can figure out how to get them both done. And we try not to create situations where it's either this way or this or that way, but rather see if we can figure out a way for there to be both and. And that completes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Bertha. I'd just like to take a moment just to remind those that are joining us virtually to please use the chat feature to submit your questions. Please submit any questions in the chat feature. And next up, I'd like to introduce Thaddeus Taylor. He's our Executive Director for Government and Community Relations, and I will hand it over to Thaddeus. Thank you, Thaddeus.
Great, thanks, Paul. I know everyone's been sitting for a while here who have been generous enough to attend here in person. If you guys want to take a minute to stand up and stretch, I encourage you to do so if anyone wants to do that. Everyone's good? There's a stretch. There we go. I know you've been sitting for a while. These are not the most comfortable chairs in the world. All right, thank you very much, you guys. So yes, again, my name is Thaddeus Taylor. I actually live right on North Capitol Street. I've been a Bloomingdale resident for the past 5 years, moving here back in 2016. I loved it so much when I was renting over on 2nd Street that I ended up buying a house right on North Capitol. So I know we've been doing a little bit of death by PowerPoint here. So just wanted to vary it a little bit here and start off with a video that was actually produced by Vox about highways. And I want you to pay close attention because there are actually 2 mentions of Washington, D.C. in this video.
Picture American cities without the highways running through their core. But highway removal projects like this one in Boston can give us a sense of how disruptive it was when the U.S. built huge highways through the cities after World War II.
These new highways will have a far-reaching economic impact on the entire nation.
That was definitely true. Highways revolutionized the way we transport goods. But inside cities, they demolished and isolated entire neighborhoods. They gave wealthy taxpayers a way out of the city and gave air pollution and traffic noise a way in. And they redesigned urban life around the car. Now 85% of Americans drive to work every day. So why did American cities agree to build highways that were bad for cities?
It's a really interesting question, and part of it actually goes all the way back to the 1930s, when a group of auto interests, such as General Motors, AAA, formed something called the National Highway Users Conference.
They began lobbying for taxes that would help fund highway construction. General Motors started to design what a new highway system could look like, and they displayed that vision at the 1939 World's Fair with Futurama, an exhibit featuring expressways that not only connected cities, but ran right through through them. It was a design that allowed for more cars and less congestion. By 1955, the Department of Commerce echoed GM's vision with something called the Yellow Book. It laid out all the routes that interstates would take throughout the country under Eisenhower's Federal Highway Act of 1956, which funded the national highway system.
A lot of it's logical. It's, connecting most of the U.S.'s major cities. But the really interesting thing is you also have highways slicing right through the downtowns of many of these cities. Pretty much every major city in the country, New York, D.C., San Francisco, Philadelphia, you have major highways cutting through neighborhoods, requiring the demolition of lots of housing and other sorts of buildings.
That's largely because some of the key contributors to the plan were auto industry members, but no urban planners.
And that's because the profession barely even existed at the time. Nowadays, there's a value placed on preserving neighborhoods, on keeping cities intact, and that concept just really didn't even exist in the 40s and 50s. When people were talking about connecting the country with highways, it seemed pretty natural just to drive highways through the center of cities as well.
Local municipalities were particularly eager to build highways under this plan because 90% of funding came from the federal government, and the other 10% from states.
There's also a darker side to the reason why all these planners wanted to build highways through downtowns and urban neighborhoods.
Highways not only paved the way for more and more white people to move into homogeneous suburbs, they also provided cover for targeted demolitions inside the city.
During that era, federal policies and implicit priorities of planners dictated that you had, vibrant, dense downtown neighborhoods filled mostly with African-American residents. Instead of being preserved under the plan, they were slated as targets for removal. They were considered blight, and an easy way of getting rid of that blight was by demolishing them and paving a highway through it.
Neighborhoods and streetcars were pushed aside to make way for the automobile.
Look at the neighborhoods of Black Bottom and Paradise Valley in Detroit.
When you go back to the 30s and 40s, these are thriving, dense neighborhoods filled with hundreds of thousands of residents, of businesses, and if you go back today, they're mostly just empty grass plots.
This wasn't just a historical accident. It became a pattern in cities across the country. Poor and minority residents were displaced to make way for highways, and white residents used those highways to commute into the city for jobs and commute back home at night.
The only exception to this pattern is in places where highways were slated to go through wealthy neighborhoods.
There were actually proposals to put a highway through Northwest D.C. and through Greenwich Village in Manhattan. But you can guess what happened there.
Anywhere where residents had the means to organize and protest, they were often able to stop the highways from being built. Whereas in places where residents didn't have the political capital and other sorts of privileges that allow you to do that, their neighborhoods ended up being demolished, and they're now highways today.
Oh, my apologies. Back on board here. So I hope you heard those two examples of Washington, D.C. One on the aspect of D.C. is considered one of those cities that had a highway run through it. The other aspect is there was actually originally plans to run it basically down Wisconsin Avenue through Georgetown. But obviously in that area, there's a population that has greater means and greater clout to be able to prevent that from happening. The result of that is we got it. So that's how you have North Capitol happening, which Paul was able to allude to earlier. We wanted to give you a little bit of a sense. I know we've seen a couple pictures so far, but this is a bird's eye view of the streetscape area that Bertha was alluding to, basically from First over to Lincoln and all the way north to Channing down to Florida Avenue. This is something that actually our ANC 5E passed in a resolution with their agreement for these boundaries of the streetscape initiative. And then in green, you're able to see what the proposed area of the deck over park would cover. Essentially from U Street to just short of Seaton. Again, that is based on the current trajectory of the underpass and the need that if you're going to cap that, if you're going to still allow for semis, et cetera, to run through so they don't clip the top of their vehicles, that's why we're proposing that area. Of course, if the decision was made as part of the feasibility study, which I will talk a little bit about later, to continue to expand that and to dig out further, that avails you to increasing the trajectory that you would have for the cap over park. A lot of us have talked so far about a little bit of our plan, our vision statement for what we would like to see happen here. And again, this has been something that has been informed by several community meetings, which we've held here right in the basement of St. Martin's Church, as well as numerous interactions that we've had with civic associations, not just Bloomingdale and Eckington, but those who abut the entire North Capitol corridor down to New York Avenue, up to the interchange at Irving when you think about Stronghold. We're really looking about rectifying the infrastructure wrongs of the past and reactivating North Capitol. This is an opportunity to have a hub, a place where people come to re-engage with each other. We often hear about people who haven't even crossed over North Capitol Street to go and explore all that Eckington has to offer and vice versa. So we want to be able to have this safe space where people can come and re-engage with each other. This gives you a sense, again, of where we're currently at. You see this big gaping chasm between Rhode Island Avenue, which is the diagonally running street, and then the T Street Bridge. You can see St. Martin's Church, that large structure there where we are currently located. And then what could happen in the future. This was an image that Sandrine had showed as well, but you get a sense of some of the environmental impacts that are possible here with bioretention, including historical aspects like a historical timeline that would illustrate all of the things that Paul alluded to, the importance of these two communities and the other abutting communities along North Capitol Street. I know we've been showing this lower image for a while here, but just to give you a little bit of perspective to show where that exact same image is taken from. So you see this big underpass gap. And the idea here is what is happening a lot across the world, not only in the United States, but is reconfiguring of how can we use this airspace. There's potential for it. And so that is our suggestion. Let's reutilize something. Let's take advantage of the destruction and the highwayization of North Capitol that happened and really say, okay, how can we benefit from this? This could actually be a boon to us to create something that reunites the communities. As we've talked a little bit about, we've had a high level of engagement here, not only on the community and civic level, but also with our council members, not only the Ward 5 council member, Kenny McDuffie, but also Councilwoman Mary Che, as well as a number of other entities within the executive branch of the DC government. Obviously, we had to take a little bit of a pause towards the beginning of COVID, but since then we've re-upped the engagement and it's led to a number of successes, as well as you can see the re-engagement with a number of civic associations that we've been engaged with. This is something that we pointed out too. This is the sort of traffic that you're talking about, and myself and Sandrine have a personal connection to this as we experience this on a daily and nightly occasion. You see on the far left side, that's a view from T Street looking south. The Capitol is way off in the distance there. The middle image is right in front of St. Martin's Church, where we're currently located. And then the other one is a view from Rhode Island looking north up towards Michigan Avenue. As we mentioned earlier, we actually were lucky enough to work with ZGF Architects, who is the contracted international architecture firm that is working on the deck over at DuPont Circle. The one at DuPont Circle, if you're familiar with that area, is on Connecticut Avenue. It's been a couple years in the making, right in front of Kramer Books, that goes from the circle itself up to Q Street as part of a larger streetscape initiative. So this was a pro bono effort that worked in conjunction through the Bloomingdale Civic Association. And so, again, this is just an idea. This was to give people a sense of what could be. Breaking things into different sections. You have an area for rest, an area of play, an area to gather, and then finally the beautiful vista to really re-engage with that incredible view of the Capitol. As people may already know, people stand right on T Street and look through that chain link fence and still snap pictures. But this would be a way to remove that and really embrace that iconic vision to greet people as a gateway that North Capitol could really be with people coming in from Maryland and Virginia. Safety is vitally important when we consider this particular deck over. And as the American Journal of Public Health cited, they actually did a formal study, and we're actually currently in communication with one of those researchers at Columbia University. We actually have a call coming up with him on Tuesday this week to learn a little bit about more. Possibility of modeling our particular deck over park is possible as well, talking about the health benefits and the economic return. So when you're talking about return on investment, there are a lot of different ways to slice and dice that, but obviously one of those is the environmental impact, but then also the financial return that you could see. And there are a lot of different ways to conceive of an economic return, which Bertha had discussed as well. essentially implementing a deck over park as they examined the one of the Cross Bronx Expressway. The Brooklyn-Queens Expressway appeared to save both lives and money. Savings were realized for 84% of Monte Carlo simulations, which is a manner to look at a bunch of different variables simultaneously. There's been some allusion to a possibility of bringing this back up to grade. And the concern about that is, well, then you implement a bunch of cross streets. And there's this inherent belief that by adding stoplights and stop signs, that is a manner to calm traffic and that it's a manner to increase safety for pedestrians. However, formally, in the formal definition of traffic calming, traffic lights and stop signs are not a method to calm traffic. So it's a common misperception, and a lot of references are made to that, not only by the U.S. Federal Highway Administration, but also by the New York City Department of Transportation, where they talk about the downside of adding traffic lights and stop signs, which can exacerbate conflicts and really make the intersection more dangerous. There's an increased likelihood that someone's going to try and speed through. Think about trying to cross the street. If you liken things to maybe walking along 14th Street, do you feel safe walking in those areas? Or, on the alternative, seeing a neutral area with very few lanes, basically what we have right now, and having a central plot of land that could be crossed. Do you feel safer with that? This is actually an image over in Georgetown in Northwest DC. And there are a number of different ways that you can implement different traffic calming measures. And these are things with ourselves as the North Capitol Deckover Steering Committee, all we can do is what you guys could do. Google them and find out what traffic calming measures are that have not only been used within our city, but in other cities across the country, and the different ways that those are being approached. However, none of us are subject matter experts when it comes to traffic calming, when it comes to being transportation or structural engineers. So these are just to kind of give people a sense of what is out there and to reconceive of what traffic calming really means. You can have varied street surfaces. You can have streets that are curbless, which show to the driver that there's really a distinction between the two areas, but in a manner that makes them more attuned to their surroundings. Here you can see an example on the lower picture which shows parking being utilized as a natural barrier. So a lot of visual cues become the important aspect when you start thinking about safety. And that's what we think about with the deck over park. If you think about T Street, you could almost superimpose some of these traffic calming measures on that. You could kick out the existing curb and to narrow the street, for example. You could have signage like this, shared street ahead. You could have, like in the top right corner picture where it says River Street, welcoming people. Here you are in the North Capitol Deckover Park, Gateway Park. A lot of visual cues have been demonstrably shown to improve safety in areas, not only within the United States, but on an international level. For example, in San Francisco, we talk about a raised intersection. That's a possibility at the T Street Exchange or even Rhode Island Avenue. Again, lots of just idea generation at this point. A raised intersection is a design tool that transforms the whole intersection into a place that puts pedestrians first. It increases the visibility of people on foot and gets cars and bikes to slow down through the whole intersection. This is exactly the kind of street design that San Francisco needs more of to achieve the city's Vision Zero, akin to Washington, D.C., of eliminating all traffic deaths and severe injuries by 2024. We talked a little bit about this isn't a new idea. It may even go back to the 1980s here in Washington, D.C. But it's not just us. It's other cities all across the country and all across the world. It's a trend. Freeway cap parks really dialed down the noise and pollution that Sandrine was talking about in her environment and urban setting presentation. To give you a little bit of a sense of the geographic range that you have in the United States, this is actually a couple years old at this point, but still gives you a sense of the direction that things are going. Seattle, up in the Northwest, actually implemented theirs. They were one of the first, possibly the first, to do a deck over park, and that was back in the 1970s. We see other examples, for example, here in Tulsa, Oklahoma. A lot of them give a name to the area. So this is the Gathering Place, and you see how they were able to come up with a creative way to embrace this deck over idea. And actually, this being the 100th anniversary of the Tulsa Race Riot Centennial, you have State Senator Kevin Matthews talking about the importance of drawing people, and where people are drawn, they're in closer proximity to the things that will educate them. We see this area for us as well, for our neighborhood on North Capitol Street, to embrace that education component as well. North Vancouver is also considering one at this point. So you can see on the left side of this image, again, similar in terms of scope. You have a 2-block long deck over the freeway with both east and west sides of the park connected by a pedestrian overpass. Dallas is actually doing their second one. This is in Oak Cliff, Texas, the Southern Gateway Deck Park. And here you have a quote from one of the architecture professors at the University of Texas at Arlington talking about the importance of this change. Way back in 2008, New York City actually identified 83 transportation corridors that could be decked over. Of course, as you see here, there are a lot of other options when you consider decking over, not just over an underpass, but even over areas that have existing transportation, like here with a subway line that's above ground. This goes back to the professor that I was mentioning at Columbia University as they took a look at the Brooklyn-Queens Expressway and decking it over. I think it's important to see the comparison here as we look ahead to Dallas as well. This was the initial park that's gained such success. You can see a before picture on the left of the Clyde Warren Park and then after. The quote here is particularly interesting and I think really strikes at the heart of what the proposition that we have for doing our deck over park, ours in the community, how Clyde Warren Park has, quote, kind of turned into our public square. Bobby Abney said, president of the Dallas Park and Recreation Board. It's really turned into a place where you see anyone and everyone. In St. Louis, the Gateway Arch Park was created over Interstate 70. And they actually considered bringing it back up to grade, but actually deemed it back then that it was not nearly as safe as decking over is. But it's not only within the United States. You have it in Germany as well, Berlin, Bochum, Dusseldorf, Hamburg, and Munich. And it's not just the Germans that are noticing this, but even the Aussies down south of the equator are taking a look and taking notice of what the Germans are able to develop here. Sandrine had alluded earlier to the hamburger, it is hamburger, because of Hamburger deck over in Hamburg, Germany. And this gives you an example. This is actually just one section of the 3 sections that they're doing on the longest interstate highway intercountry highway that runs the entire north-south corridor of Germany and as a part of the Autobahn. Again, this is this quote that the lead engineer had mentioned about the importance of noise pollution. Another example here is in Maastricht. This is in the Netherlands, and this gives you a sense of a side-by-side comparison here of the development of the way that the girders would be laid across to develop the foundation for the deck over park, and then in the next picture you see what that finished product looks like. What's interesting about Maastricht, and again, these are just ideas, but they actually do a double level, a kind of double-decker underpass, which allows for the local regional travel to be on one level, and then the cross-country travel to be on another level. And with that, I want to show you guys another video. This one actually comes from CNN to give you a little bit of a sense of the development in Maastricht.
The A2, a highway helping to connect the Netherlands with its neighbors, allows a free flow of traffic between countries, except for one major spot, Maastricht. Here, the stream of cars hits a bottleneck, facing a 50-kilometer speed limit and a series of unwelcome traffic lights.
You see the highway running to the heart of the city in a residential area, and that's very bad because there's a lot of traffic on the highway, and thousands of children have to go to school and pass a highway in the middle of the city. It's crazy.
So the city hatched a plan to help bring some sanity to the chaos.
We came up with this plan, a double-stack tunnel, which gives even more capacity for the traffic than any forecast predicted. You can build it in a very small area, which gives more opportunity for real estate development on top.
Around 80% of the traffic flow will be redirected underground to the 2.3-kilometer double-decker tunnel, Regional and local traffic will use the upper level, and through traffic will use the lower one. It will allow vehicles to travel 80 to 100 kilometers per hour, keeping up with highway speeds. The thought is that with the highway hidden below, new opportunities for life above will emerge.
The nice thing about our plan is that we not only make a solution for the traffic, for the cars, but that we make a better Maastricht East, that we connect the neighborhoods and that we make it attractive again.
What will be known as the green carpet will include an estimated 30,000 square meters of new real estate development and a 5-kilometer-long park. It's a plan with the price tag.
So with that, I want to show you what has then occurred since that point.
The situation is now completely different. At the exact same location where once traffic ruled, we now find a lovely park in development with newly planted trees and fresh grass. The important motorway took up a lot of space, but that space can now be used by humans. The internationally important road now runs underneath this location in multiple tunnels. That meant the entire strip of land that was taken up by the road could be redeveloped. The so-called groene loper, green carpet, is a linear park with only some smaller streets for local traffic. At the north end you can see where traffic enters, the 2.3-kilometer long tunnel system that has 2 levels. There are separate tubes for each direction, and international through traffic drives 1 level below the tubes for regional traffic. The first plans for the tunnel were made in 2004. Building took 5 years, and the tunnel was opened in December 2016. It had cost 850 million euros. With the motorway underground, the ground level could be completely redesigned. The green carpet was constructed in 2017 and 2018. The former motorway strip became a long avenue with lots of new trees. With most traffic gone, the intersections were reconstructed as roundabouts, naturally with priority for cycling, according to the latest design recommendations in the Netherlands.
Sorry. Let me get back here. So again, this is something that we talked about as being part and parcel to what's already been discussed by the DC government. It's part of their plans. And even in the most recently enacted DC Comprehensive Plan Amendment Act of 2021, there are specific citations within that comprehensive plan that talk about explicitly decking over. Connecting Bloomingdale and Eckington. Improve connectivity between Bloomingdale and Eckington by expanding the North Capitol overpass. Decking over the entire expanse to create a tunnel between Seaton Place Northeast and Rhode Island Avenue Northeast, and creating a green space to make crossing North Capitol Street more inviting for pedestrians and other persons using non-motor vehicles. Likewise, there's an actual reference to podium parks, which is essentially their way of describing what a deck-over park would be, considering the development of a podium-type open space, as we see at the last line there, the underpasses of North Capitol Street. We had talked about this as something that's been around for a while, and this goes back to what Terry Janine had mentioned about the Mid-City East Small Area Plan back in 2014, as well as the livability study. It's been something that's been in the mind of the DC Office of Planning for quite some time. And now we've come to the point where, after all these many years, $1 million has actually been included in the DC FY22 budget. Again, we're waiting on Congress to formally approve that, but at least with the budget that was sent over by DC Council, we have an explicit mention in the mayor's budget to conduct a feasibility study for a potential deck over on North Capitol Street. 5 of the members of the North Capitol Deckover Steering Committee, 3 from Bloomingdale, 1 from Eckington, and 1 from Stronghold, actually gave live testimony in support of getting this $1 million secured in the budget. And again, we'd like to thank Council Member Quinn McDuffie, who was instrumental in getting this included in the mayor's budget. So we're looking forward to see what happens next, but we just wanted to give you this overall update at this point and encourage you to send us any sort of questions that you may have at our email address at northcapitaldecover@gmail.com, as well as to give us a follow, a shameless plug for that, on our Instagram site and Twitter at @CapTheGap_DC. And at that point, I think I will turn it back over to Paul.
Thank you, Thaddeus. So just want to start off with just a note that there are bathrooms located through that door, so please feel free to use the restrooms at either side. And for those folks that are joining us virtually, please submit your questions via chat. We do have a number of questions that have been submitted that were addressed already throughout the presentations. But if there's anything that you would like to have submitted, please do that in the chat feature as well. So we are going to go into our Q&A, and I'd just like to see first if you'd like to take a break first, or are you guys good with continuing? All right, great. So we will open it up to Q&A. And just a reminder, there is a mic, so if you'd like to voice your question, the mic is on. You don't have to do anything. The mic is on, it's live, and just speak your question in. And thank you.
Yes, the first question is, how long before the feasibility study begins, and if DC decides to do the deck over, how long before that would begin?
Okay, thank you for the question. Thad, you want to take that?
Sure. So in our conversations with the program managers who have already been assigned to this particular feasibility study that's being considered by Congress right now, DDOT's taking the active step to try and get ahead of the game, and so we already have engagement with those DDOT program managers. The thought is that usually the way that initial steps are taken is that there are multiple community engagements that are formally done by DDOT. And so bringing out all sorts of members from the community, those will be publicly posted so that everyone is aware of them. They're thinking that to get the first ideas, normally what they would do is they would open up the idea, okay, what do people want to see? Get feedback, come back with 2 or 3 proposals for a second community engagement, take feedback again, and come back with a final understanding of what the communities are looking for. So at a minimum, we'd be looking at 3 community engagements, probably over the next 9 to 12 months is the thought, depending on how quickly DDOT is able to use that $1 million fund to likely contract out to get some assistance from industry. In terms of the actual development of a deck over, a very conservative thought is probably in the realm of maybe even 7 years. So there's so many different aspects that go into this discussion, though, because as we've learned, this is an opportunity that DDOT and the city are taking not only to look at the deck over area, that is a core area that they're considering, but also to expand that breadth and really to consider the entire North Capitol corridor overall. As you think about what's happening in South Capitol Street, where that's the largest infrastructure investment that the city has made in the realm of around $500 million, now they're turning their eyes to North Capitol Street and taking that consideration from Massachusetts, basically north of Michigan or possibly even north of that. They still have to determine that scope, but it's important to understand that although the deck over consideration, our segment here will be of high consideration, and that's the language that was in the mayor's budget, that the determination has been to let's see if we can really improve the entire North Capitol corridor. So there's a lot that's going to be involved in working on this particular project.
Thank you for the question. Next question, and I just, sorry I didn't mention, but if you could just identify yourself, like your name and your neighborhood, that would be great, just to understand, audience. Thank you.
Ahmet Kılıç, I live in First MV, 12 years resident in Bloomingdale. I'm an architect practicing here, also So being an architect, I looked at it more like a design aspect. By the way, the presentation was very good, wonderful. Everything said was no comment. I would like to congratulate the team for that. I don't have a question, but just comments, and I have to run. I'm sorry, I have some other engagements today. The design, I think, can be a little bit further developed. In general, this is a really great opportunity. A couple of things I saw are like we saw a bunch of precedents from the nation, from Europe. Those were very good examples to give ideas, but this is very unique and different. And I couldn't tell like exact fit for this. This is like a overpass, but it is not as linear as the other examples. It's like the design is treated more like a linear space, but actually it might be a nod as well. So we should think about that. Like the street furnitures are a little bit like a boulevard, but actually it doesn't go anywhere. So so how do we attract people here? And the North Capitol Street is still work in progress as far as the retail is concerned. So for these kind of spaces, we need to think about the program, how are we going to bring people here. So the easiest idea is to have retail on both sides. Then you can really get a good crowd there. But it might take some time. So until then, my quick suggestion is like maybe a kiosk here for a coffee shop. It's very popular in 21st century. Everybody, Big Bear is a great success. A little pizza store, just like it's small enough not to block the view or like not to kill the greenery. But I mean, obviously this is a long conversation. Maybe there should be a design focused meeting. I would love to be part of it. And, it needs to be a little bit finessed, but as a startup, it's a great idea. But this is different than DuPont Circle. DuPont Circle is bringing like hundreds of thousands of people a day. Here, if nothing else, it's going to connect well. I mean, it was mentioned, I think, connecting Crispus Park to Harry Thomas is a good walkway, but can it be more than that? I mean, I'm suggesting like just a design focus, something like street furniture is a good design team. And I think it'll be great. Very excited about this. Thank you.
Yeah, before you go, I just wanted to say I appreciate your quick take, and all of this is recorded, so we'll be able to take it down in more detail and discuss it. We have talked about the potential of adding a little cafe. I guess it would be north of Rhode Island. However, one of the things I wanted to mention to you, you just gave us your top of the dome thoughts, but as this sits in over the weekend, you might have some other ideas. And if you do, please don't hesitate to email us. I mean, we know you from around the neighborhood, so I'm sure you know how to find us if you'd like to have a deeper conversation. We also do have a design committee that is specifically working on design ideas, but I think that idea about having a specifically design-focused conversation, at least another one, because we did that when we were working with the architect, is a really important one. Okay, so thank you.
I'm well connected with Zach and Berta, so I'll follow up with them.
Ahmed, also, I'd just like to add, you mentioned a key thing about retail, and historically, why this area was such a desired neighborhood and area was because there was so many conveniences that were here, that were built into when the neighborhood was built. And a number of retail was part of the fabric of the neighborhood. And you could still see where a lot of the retail was located that was very vibrant up until North Capitol was made into a highway. And if you look just here at Rhode Island and that intersection, there was retail on two of the main corners there, opposite the church. It's all bricked up now, but that's part of what we would like to see happen is a lot of these old original retail spaces reactivated. But thank you for your comments and your feedback. We greatly appreciate it. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Ken Goff. I live in Edgewood. I'd like to start by thanking you all because now working remotely with my office, having a direct line to the noise tunnel of the sirens going through all day, I know you're volunteering your time and really appreciate what you're doing. I guess my question would be, for people who are strongly supportive of this, what can we do? I think there was mention of a petition. I had looked online, I couldn't find it. How can we help if we're supportive of this?
Well, I'll give one. I'll give one suggestion, and I'm sure other people can give other suggestions. But I had mentioned the notion of civic engagement and our working with the other civic associations. And one of the civic associations, we have, been to their meetings and explained the project to them, is the Edgewood Civic Association. And in particular, we are interested in trying to get a designated representative from each of the 7 civic associations in the area to be part of the steering committee. And we've even got some rules written down, in terms of such representatives, but, your responsibilities would include things like coming to the meeting, and unfortunately or fortunately, depending on one's perspective, we meet every week. But virtually right now, yeah. And maintaining a liaison with Edgewood Civic Association, so we have a constant sense of what their response is to what we're doing, if they have any new ideas, so that they could be, we could do something that puts them more central in the idea and stuff like that. But that is something that would be very helpful if we could have some representation from the Edgewood Civic Association. So what you need to do is talk to your president of the association. Now, I'm sure there are other things.
Thanks, Bertha. Yeah, just to add to that, what can you do practically right away? The petition is on the website, northcapitaldecover.org or .com. Either will work. It's a very short petition. And also, if you want to, promote that information to your neighbors in local shops in your neighborhood, or sometimes if you want to volunteer a little bit of your time, you could also reach out to us, and we would value any volunteer time that you would have. Yeah.
Just very quickly, I think all of that is very, very helpful. I think you heard mention when Thaddeus was talking about next steps and how DDOT will begin to have these open forums. It's going to be important for those of us who feel strongly about that, or strongly about this proposal, to show up. They need to hear from us that this is something that we want. Occasionally, you'll see these emails that'll go out where we talk about things like, such and such hearing is coming up. We need folks to call in or write a letter or ask your civic association to support. Those are some of the ways that we can really use the backing. Everybody's not going to be able to sit through a meeting like this, but when you can, this is of great value. And not all the conversations are going to be quite like this where we have the entire floor. At some point, DDOT will be considering other alternatives. And when we're trying to balance those and figure out, should we go left, right, or somewhere in the middle, we need voices of support. But we also need, if there are concerns as well, we got to hear that too, because we've got to be able to figure out how we're going to work this out together. So I think those are some of the ways. I might have missed something, but.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, Terry, Janine. I'd just like to add, I can't stress enough the importance if you can, send an email to our council member, Kenya McDuffie. Send an email to your, if you live in one of the other neighborhoods, your neighborhood, send an email to your civic association president. Let them know that you support the deck over. Those are great things. And then also following us on Twitter and Instagram, sharing that, it's a great way to just keep the momentum going forward.
Great, thank you again.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for your question.
Good afternoon. My name is James Coleman. I serve as pastor of All Nations Baptist Church at Rhode Island and North Capitol. And I have to make some admissions before I make my statement. First, I admit that I had no true knowledge that this was in progress since 2014. I stay down at City Hall from time to time, got a glimpse of the $1 million addition to the budget. So I'm trying to catch up. So that's admission number one. Admission number two, I do not know all the smorgasbord parts of this project because there's so many components that I don't want to misspeak, and I do not want to misassess. I've been calling out. I even wrote an email to Ms. Holloway to try to get her to communicate back to me. So I'm reaching and I'm getting educated. So if any of my comments or statements come across in an uneducated way, it is not to be negative, it's to seek understanding. I knew Harry Thomas Sr., not Jr. He shared with me the city's plan to do some things like this in the future. One of the concerns I have, since this directly impacts my church and other churches in the corridors up and down North Capitol and Rhode Island Avenue. No one has talked to the pastors. I'm not saying that you have to. I'm only suggesting that we have a conversation about the impact on our services. I don't know what disruption will be caused during the construction phase. I don't know if it's going to be a hub, a gateway, and people coming and going, whether it will interfere with our services and programs that we offer to the community already. There is gentrification. I was amused by the use of social justice and equality. It seems the religious community is being somewhat disenfranchised. I don't know where it fits into total plan. That's not accusing anyone. But I'm just saying, can we talk? I'm willing to be fair. I've worked at universities. I've worked in churches. I've worked with the government. But what I don't understand is how change can happen and those who lived in the communities that look like me, who can't change or adapt so fast, doesn't have the opportunity to grasp the idea and understand the idea. All we know is in progress 5 years down the road, been talking about on Sundays when I can't send my trustees or some other members to the meetings. So I got a glimpse of this, and I want to be here so I can hear. When they built the underpass, the church where I pastor, there were structural ramifications. The walls were cracked. The noise pollution was increased. Nobody gave any money to help. What you see there now, where those steps are, and the other part of it was to be built. We got left at the stage of our conference room foundation. The stage is up off the floor because of the underpass. The buses come and go and the traffic flow. I don't know. Some of the people who are seniors who come on the metro ride, some who've been traditionally with the church, drive in. I don't know how this is going to impact parking. Nobody has talked. Of course, that's DOT. I heard you say you had planned to have more conversation with them. and I plan to be listening. But my people don't come in on bicycles. And I know we favor dog parks, but I love dogs. But I just don't have, and however the culture you're creating and cultivating in this time of gentrification and change and shift, and I'm no Pollyanna, I know times change. I know trends are happening, and I'm willing to abide with it. But I fear for the churches. Whenever somebody gets shot, drugs, the churches, we are the first ones called. Can you help us? But you're moving us out of the community. You really literally are. We don't even have conversations. So I just want to say I'm open because I want to understand. I think from what I don't know and what I gather here today, this is the only information I've had, is I see good and I see bad, and I'm willing to talk. Yes.
I'm glad you're here, first of all.
And I'm glad I can see you for first of all, too.
Yeah.
Because I've been trying to reach you.
Yeah, well, a little bit you've been trying to reach me. But I do want to say that there's several things. You know, I do try to come to a lot of the Ecumenical Council meetings, and there's several things that that council is involved in doing that I think it's very important that you be part of, because I think one of those things is going to be a very important preface to should the deck over be funded and the issue of parking, okay? So what we're trying to do is get together they asked me to do a resolution on parking in churches, which I have absolutely no problem doing, but I don't think I'm the best person to do it. And I've asked all the members of the Ecumenical Council to come up with specific stories, you know, specific experiences, negative experiences, and the consequences of those experiences, and the history of the parking problem in, you know, in the area, and how it has changed over time and why. Okay, I'd like that kind of information to be put in the amendment, you know, in the, not the amendment, the resolution. And I think it's important to, you know, in essence, kind of have the ministers write some of the resolution as opposed to me writing whatever's in my mind. Because I think it, first of all, sets a precedent in terms of that group developing stronger relationships with DDOT, okay? Because clearly, if this deck over ever, you know, actually becomes reality, and if we should ever start construction and stuff like that, that is, that, you know, you need to have those pre-existing relationships. I'm sure Terry will share with you some of the relationship building that the Bloomingdale Civic Association has done as a result of its involvement with the First Street Tunnel construction and the Northeast Boundary Tunnel construction, and what, you know, has been learned, and the relationships and agreements that have been reached. So, you know, like I said, I'm very happy to see you here. I'll talk to you later, you know, after the meeting. I'll be happy to do that.
Well, may I say, I appreciate the invitation out, and first of all, I will avail myself.
Okay.
I'm not going to be a talker and not a listener, and not doing and speaking up for what makes sense. However, the Ecumenical Council, I know all those pastors, the majority of them anyway. I was president of the Ministers' Conference of D.C., Maryland, and Virginia. All up and down Mount Airy, St. Philip's. So you're just talking about partitions, but there are other churches that are impacted that are not even a part of the ecumenical, and putting it in a little newsletter, I promise you, does not get out to pastors. I promise
Well,
you.
yeah, but.
So we've got to find a better way, and I'm willing to work with you.
Yeah, I mean.
To
you
see
know,
how we can
but-
do better.
Yeah, you do understand I have a district.
I understand, but what you're proposing here exceeds the boundaries of your district.
What, no, the deck over does not. It's all in her
Excuse me?
district.
It's all in her district.
Oh, everything is going to be in your district?
No, but the deck over is going to be in my district.
Oh, the
Yeah.
district is just going to be in your district?
All of the, all of the streetscape will not be in my district, but the deck over in its entirety will be in my district.
The landscape to see, I'm suggesting the totality of the overdeck will impact. My church is right at North Capitol.
No, I agree it's going to impact.
So-
and I agree that you and your church need to be involved.
Okay.
And Diane Bowen's commissioner, you know.
I've talked with her.
Yeah, well, she knows all about this because I'm always talking about this at ANC meetings. Okay?
The only thing I'm saying to you,
But
ANC,
she,
respectfully.
let me just finish, Reverend Coleman. She indicated that your main concern was parking and that the church not lose parking.
Yeah.
At this point, I mean, we are at the very preliminary stages.
Yeah.
So we can't respond to that. But I can say that I personally think that is a very important issue. And everybody knows I think that the parking needs to be maintained.
Okay,
Politically, I don't think there's any elected official that's going to go out there and say parking on North Capitol ought to be taken away.
Okay.
Okay?
Well, I appreciate all
Because
of that.
we're very,
The other
we're
part
very much
is,
aware of the shortage of parking.
I don't know what landscape and what construction, how that, you may have activities at the hub where everybody come out rah, while we have services. There's just a whole lot of intangibles
Yeah, I
that
understand
have
that.
not been put on the table.
But that's because it's too early in the process. It's
Too
just-
early?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Reverend,
All right,
I'd
thank
like to
you.
add, thank you for your comments and certainly welcome your input. I'd just like to just reiterate, we've done these community forums and we specifically we scheduled them on Saturdays. So going forward, just note that we're going to continue to do these outreach community forums. We're also going to be doing them virtual. We just started that this past August. And we're going to look to schedule more virtual community forums that are going to be done via Zoom. So we're looking to just ramp up more and more community engagement. So, and we'll be reaching out with you directly. And just another thing, I wholeheartedly agree with you regarding the local churches. I'm a member of this church actually, and wholeheartedly believe they are a cornerstone of our neighborhood, of our neighborhoods, and certainly support the churches here. So thank you for. And go ahead.
Just very, very quickly. I think it might make sense at some point for us to do something that is specific to the churches that will be directly impacted, and maybe a very specific presentation that's just us and you, so that we can hear that feedback, because it's very valuable feedback. I do want you to understand that as we have gone through this, the churches, like the perspective, at least our view of the perspective of the needs of the churches with regard to parking has been a part of the conversation. And I can tell you just a month ago, maybe, we had a walk with DDOT where the DDOT folks who are going to be working on the contract that will relate the feasibility study walked with us through the corridor as we laid out our plan, and so that they could put eyes on really visualize what we're talking about. And we stood right outside of here, and I pointed to them and showed them. I said, look, what we cannot do is compromise this parking. Now, that's my perspective. And because I don't know how the churches will survive if we lose North Capitol parking. I can tell you that at least my view of the alternative plan that has been, that I guess we're not talking about, is that it removes nearly all the North Capitol parking. And I think that's going to be a real issue. So I don't want you to think that this has not been on our mind at all. It has. But I think the next step for us will probably be let's have a conversation to figure out how we can schedule a date and get the pastors on the line and really walk through the plan and get your feedback so that you can have the conversations you need to have with your congregations as well and get their feedback, and we can all work together to figure out what's possible.
Yeah, I plan to get them more involved, but I would also like if you, like you did with St. Martin's, and say hello to Father Kelly, but also come to All Nations, because you're right at my door. Look at it.
I meant all the churches that would be impacted.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, together, not one-on-one, but together. Y'all come together, we come
I
together.
thought you said you were in front of St.
Oh, no, yeah,
Martin's.
when we did the walkthrough, we were in front of your church at one point. We walked down and we came
and
all
I didn't
the way.
know about it. Oh.
No, because it was just the committee and DDOT.
I'm
And so
picking.
when we got right here at this intersection, I specifically pointed out the parking to them.
Okay, thank you so very much.
May I also emphasize, I think it's really, thank you. May I also emphasize that I really think it's important that since Commissioner Barnes is a very stalwart member of your church, he is also a stalwart member of the ANC, that you know, she's got to vote on the ANC.
I understand.
On these kind of matters.
I understand.
So I think, you know, you need to
I understand, but
keep
you're
in
the,
contact
you're the
with her.
chair of Bloomingdale and serve on the leadership role.
She's the
But-
chair of the Civic.
Oh, okay, you're the chair.
Uh-huh.
I'm sorry, what was your name
My
again?
name is Terry Janine. Sorry, my name is Terry Janine Quinn, and I'm president of the Civic Association.
Okay.
Yes.
But yeah, so, you know, I think it's important, you know, I think one thing that we've learned in terms of our advocacy is you don't ever put all your eggs in one basket.
Oh, no,
So you want to
I've talked with
have as
Commissioner
many,
Barnes.
yeah, have
I
as
have,
many, yeah.
and I have no
But
problem.
she knows
I've
about-
talked with Councilmember McDuffie. My issue is not knowing.
Yeah, but she knows, that's what I'm trying to tell you.
We live here and we don't know. Instead of being defensive,
I'm not being defensive.
Instead of being defensive, listen to what he's saying. He is right.
No, I understand that.
And you will not, you're not listening.
No, I am listening, and
You're not
what,
listening. Right now, I'm trying to speak to you.
Okay.
I'm just trying to argue
Okay.
back. He started his speech being extremely complimentary and open, and you have just been saying, but, you know, all these other people know. It's his front doorstep. He should know. We live like 50 feet from the corner.
Okay.
We didn't know.
well,
So that to the extent that.
may I ask him a question? May I ask him a question?
If
The
you don't wanna-
question,
If you wanted to.
You gotta let her
interrupt
finish.
and not
You gotta
listen
let her
to us,
listen.
That's fine, but the criticism is, that's what
Okay.
you're doing and not listening.
Okay.
And he's been more than fair, more than open, and
No,
he's just
you
trying to
hadn't
say,
been fair.
with his front door, and he should have known, and we should know, and we haven't. And that's his point exactly.
okay. May I ask a question, sir, Reverend? Do you think it would be appropriate for me to see if the Ecumenical Council would devote one of its meetings on this? Or is that, in your opinion, not a very effective way to handle it?
I like the suggestion. Is it Ms. Kelly?
Quinn.
Huh?
Quinn, Quinn, Quinn.
Quinn suggests, get it together first, because the one thing you don't want to do is bring us together and not have potential answers to our questions. That's all I'm suggesting. I'm just saying, if we go there and we come and we're expressing the emotionalism of our congregants, and you're giving us something way over here, then we got miscommunication.
Can I just come back to your very, very important points? So, which is how do we communicate? How do we get the information out? This has been a challenge for us. We have this website. We've used social media engagement. We've used Nextdoor, LinkedIn. I mean, not LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. But it's just not everyone is on this social media. I mean, I'm not on Twitter, for example.
Can I say something, please?
Can I just finish? So one thing that that we've really tried this time to do is to put print paper. We put signs up. We volunteered. I mean, we all volunteered. Our weekends to put all these paper signs up, to put up the print on the T Street Bridge, to put in mailboxes. to do these community forums, but any ideas, any solutions that you have to help spread the word, then, and reach everyone, not just people that are on social media or on internet, then, please, we're here. Yes, thanks.
And as I take my seat, I'm trying to sensitize you to the reality.
Mm-hmm.
You can put as much as you want in writing. I went to the website. I got 4 degrees. I went to the website to try to understand the meaning and connect the dots. I could not. I just couldn't.
Thank you. Thank you. I just want to, before we go on, we have a lot of questions lined up and a lot on the Q chat as well. But I just want to touch on a couple of things. So we have done 4 forums over the last, let's see, 5 years at least. And a lot of that, as Sandrina mentioned, we look to try to target every kind of avenue for outreach. So it wasn't only this year with this forum that we did printed flyers. We've done them in the past as well, as well as the blogs and the listservs and and also putting up the posters in all the major commercial, like retail spots in the neighborhood. Definitely could do better. We're all volunteering and doing this on our own. But one of the key things that I encourage you all is filling out the survey, putting your an email so that we have a way of reaching you directly as well going forward, because we definitely want to make sure that everybody who's got especially a vested interest in living nearby or on North Capitol stays informed. And I appreciate the feedback. Definitely. Next question, please.
Hello, my name is, let's see, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So my name is Chiquita Martin McCoy, and I have real roots here.
Could you speak into the mic? Because we do want to capture.
Okay, that's a little better, I guess.
Great, thank you.
So my name is Chiquita Martin McCoy. I have really deep roots here. I'm 47, and my grandparents have owned a home here all my life and before. So I live on Seaton Place. I did not know this was happening. And we've owned this home for a very long time. So I was a little bit taken aback. In regards to your outreach efforts, there are a lot of older people that live on my block that may not have access to social. And even me having access to social, I didn't even know to kind of look for anything like this. So you referenced a number of reports, like small plans, like area plans that have been completed. I would like to read that. Like, where would I find it? Also, the whole notion of couching this and trying to connect the communities. It just kind of, and again, like Pastor, I have great intentions for everything, and we can do that now without that. And so I don't want it to become like this is the way that we're going to bring everyone together, but if that's our true intention, we can do that now before this park or whatever it's going to be is made. So I just don't want that to be used as the reason for us doing right by each other on both sides of this bridge. In regards to the project in and of itself, I do believe it's going to disenfranchise some of us on the northeast side. I'll give you one example. We're landlocked. And moving here to the city, we've worked in Alexandria. I can't bike to Alexandria, although I'm not doing that now. My husband is a salesman, so we need cars. We're landlocked. We do not have off-street parking. And it's important to us to live in the city, to own the home that we're in, to keep it in the family. And then what are we going to do if, in fact, there's no parking, say, on North Capitol for the other people? We're already having issues with that, with different activities that are happening. So in regards to us saying, like, yeah, we want to connect the communities and help each other, like, that's something I'm looking to figure out. How can you guys help us on the northeast side with things like that? Another thing I'm thinking about is, again, I believe in it, and I do want to decrease the noise. I want clean air for my child. You know, I want clean air for my husband and all the families that are on our street. But when in fact they start building, now mind you, there's like just this week, our neighbor was getting the heavy up. They blocked off our entrance to our house. Had to climb under caution tape, jump into my front yard to get in my own house. Like, that's ridiculous. So where's all that traffic's going to reroute to? Lincoln Road. And Lincoln Road for us is a whole train wreck. There are no calming areas like on First Street. They have all the bumps. They have the little things on the side to, you know, secure the bikers. I mean, I'm just a little bit, it's not that I don't want these things, but I don't have all the resources to maybe push forward as far as you guys have gotten with this passion project of a park. And I do believe it's for safety, and I do believe it's going to do all these great things, but let's not just do this thing where we're just saying like, yeah, we're trying to connect them. We have real issues right now on the other side of the bridge that you're not even dealing with, right? So it's like, how do we, again, come together? And again, I need to understand the dynamics of DC politics and getting involved. And so that's why I'm here. And the only reason I knew that you guys were having is because of the flyer. So that's great. Oh, thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I'm on the Eckington side as well,
Yeah.
and I put the flyer in your mailbox.
And I appreciate that because, again, it says from Seaton to V. What does that mean for everybody on Seaton Place? Like, and so I'm like, And I know I have an ANC rep, and I'm like, but no one's come? No one? Seaton to V. I'm thinking the residents on Seaton Place, somebody should have been on that street knocking on all those doors and saying, hey, this is what's up. And that didn't happen. The same for V Street, and I will help do that. I start texting my folks, my parents, to say, listen, watch this right now. You know, so we have to figure that part of it out. And if it is a true thing that we're trying to be like just kumbaya connected and, you know, bridging a gap between what's happening between Bloomingdale and on the in Eckington, then we need to do more of that now. We don't wait for 7 years. And then the other part of that is I do want to know, and I'm not sure what that was about, but I'm going to let it pass. The other part of it is, I know you have the committee, and it seems to be more Bloomingdale, but is there a way for there to be more Eckington probably in like participating? Again, I'm new to this, but I do see that this is a big push from the Eckington side. And Sanjay, I appreciate what you're doing to represent, but I'm sure there's some voices that aren't being heard. And we have to make a concerted effort to get that. So, any information that you can share?
Website. All the links are there.
On the website. I was looking today.
Yeah.
While I was sitting right here, and like the pastor, it was very hard.
I can show you where it is on the website. I'll come over and show you.
The website has a lot of the stuff that you mentioned. It has all those reports, or it has, links to those reports.
Yeah, and then I'll just like to add that we do actively look to make this an inclusive multi-neighborhood committee, and so we do have actually two folks that are on the committee from Eckington. So there's Sandrine and then another gentleman, Mark Galvan, who's on the steering committee. And as Bertha had been mentioning earlier, we are actively looking to have official representation from the neighboring civic associations, so they have a seat at the desk, at the table with the effort. So it's a key component of what we're trying to do.
If you live in Edgewood or Eckington?
I live in Eckington, right on Seaton Place.
Well, then you can, I would encourage you to approach the Eckington president and see if you could be a designated Eckington Civic Association member of the steering committee, because they do not have a designated person.
Okay.
So that's open.
So if I can just address
They don't have one for whoever else is in here, LeDroit Park doesn't have one. Hanover doesn't have one. Stronghold has one. Who else doesn't have one? Bates and Edgewood. Those are the ones that have not identified and, someone that volunteered to be the designated representative.
Got it. Thank you.
Before you go, thank you for the feedback. I think it's really helpful, particularly what the two of you said about the website. And I think that's why it's good to get diverse perspectives, because when we saw the website, we were like, wow, everything is here. This is working great. And so to hear actual feedback that folks are having problems, like when you're trying to find a very targeted thing, is very helpful. And it might, if you're still here when we're done, I know this has gone on long, perhaps we can kind of go through it with you, one of us, and try to see where we can see where the problems are, so we can then go on our end, try to fix those issues. I'm not going to be able to get to everything that you said because there was a lot there. I'm happy to talk to you offline.
Absolutely.
Absolutely will avail myself to that. But I do want to, and we might be able to do this offline because I don't want to take, I know there are other people standing, but I think the parking point is important. I think it's important for me to, I don't really understand what the parking issue is. What is it that you're concerned that people will come and park?
I mean, it's going to be, they will come and park because we live right across the street from the park we have right now, right?
Yeah,
Harry
yeah.
Thomas. So there are activities and events which we absolutely love, right?
Yeah.
But we do plan our life around that. So
Got
we'll
it.
come home late.
Okay, I just wanted to understand.
And the other part, we're landlocked. So for those who are privileged to have a garage space or an alley, we don't have that.
Yes.
So that's another little glitchy part, right?
Got it.
And again, you have, like the pastor said, like his congregation, they drive in, but you have some people who work far. Like, again, my husband is in sales. He has to drive, right? Although we love to walk, we have an e-car. I mean, we're doing the things, right?
Exactly.
But it's still...
You still need a car.
We still need a car.
Right, I'm with you. And so I think we can have more of a conversation around that, but there's one point I didn't want to let go, and that is about this, you briefly mentioned, I think it was just, to illustrate the point, but about trying to get traffic calming on Lincoln
Road,
as opposed to First Street. And let me, in terms when we talk
and
about
I'll tell you another reason why I said that. When my mom was growing up, she was actually hit by a car on Lincoln Road.
Okay.
And here it is, I'm 47.
Still dealing
and
with it.
Still no calming measures.
Yes.
So again, it's about like, how can we too get
the same thing? Which is what I'm going to try to address if you give me, just because I don't want to hold folks up about this. But I do want to be really clear about the stuff that happened on First Street with regard to traffic calming. First of all, I think my first point is traffic is still jacked up. So I wish I could say that all of this stuff that we have done has solved the problem. It has not. We have been out there with DDOT having an event, and it's like, look, a car flying through a stop sign, left, right, and in the middle. And so that's not for me to say. I'm not saying that I would discourage moving forward with measures. I'm just saying it is not all it looks like it is right now. And so we are still pushing DDOT to do more. Now, the issue in terms of connectivity, I think we're having two different conversations about connectivity. I cannot, as president of the Civic Association in Bloomingdale, come over to Eckington and dictate what happens there. And I certainly don't want them doing it in Bloomingdale. But what I can tell you is that the way we were able to do that is by neighbors just like you getting together with other neighbors just like you who are sick and tired of the traffic. And they came to the Civic Association and to their ANCs, but really it was the Civic Association who beat down the doors of DDOT. And I can tell you that conversation also started in 2014. And we didn't start to see any real activity on that until, what was that, maybe 2018? So it took, we went through several DDOT directors. I said 2014. No, that conversation started in 2012. And we went through several DDOT directors with promises and promises and promises and promises. And you have to, it's a shame I have to calm myself because I get a little passionate about it. I watch my language in the church. But it's so frustrating to have to go through these conversations over and over and over. But the reality is that's why you need to have a team of folks working on it. It's good to work with your civic association, but you got to have the neighbors to really stand on their necks. They would not ever let me forget about traffic calming. So every time I saw DDOT, that was the thing I was talking to them about. But I know there are other people. So after there, I'll get with you and we'll talk about it.
Absolutely, because what I'm seeing right now is just it's bothering it because I'm a little surprised that the
Exactly.
president's not even here. I would think a project this big and of this magnitude, you need to be working side by side. And I appreciate Sandrine being here, but trust me, I know that what I will be doing next.
Yeah, yeah. And I will also say that we just had a forum with Eckington Civic Association 2 weeks, last week, within the last 2 weeks. And I'm not sure why that didn't get, I mean, the Eckington Civic Association was hosting it.
No, they
So,
weren't. That's the problem.
well, they told us they were. So, so at any rate, our agreement was that they were hosting it. So I don't know how that message didn't get out. What I can tell you is that on our end, we face the same kind of communication challenges because you cannot, I mean, I don't know what y'all's budget is, but I know ours, and I can tell you that we could not get 7,500 flyers for every issue we need to get onto every door we need to get it onto. So we have to say, like, okay, here are the 4 times a year where we're going to do this. Or in these COVIDian times, I mean, are you going to somebody's door? You know, so it's a real challenge, but it's one that we're going to have to figure out a way through. So I hear you. I just want you to know that you've been heard.
Thank you so much. I appreciate all you're doing.
Thank you. Next question, and then we're going to go to some of the chat questions. So please.
Hello, my name is Brant. I'm a resident of Eckington. I want to thank you very much for the very well, yes, shout out Eckington, woo! Thank you for the very well organized community forum and the excellent presentations. Really appreciate it. I know there's a lot of time that went into it. You know, I'm particularly inspired by getting the chance to undo a lot of the just terrible segregationist atrocities, I mean, let's just call it what it is, that North Capitol represents all the way up and down. I love everything about this deck over project, and I want more of it. You know, I'd like to really see this type of impact extend and benefit more of the North Capitol corridor. I think it was Thaddeus, you mentioned that this would be kind of a part of a broader North Capitol kind of revitalization or something. How should we think about how this 5-block proposal might interplay with the whole corridor changes? And, you know, if something gets set in stone for this, does that then close off other options for the whole corridor? Like, what, you know, how should we think about that interplay there?
Yeah, Thad, you want to take that first? Thank you. Thank you for your question.
Sure. So in terms of, we've kind of talked about the historical nature of this, that this has been going on for quite some time with this particular focus on this area of an underpass. It's more of a recent development that came out really during the Department of Transportation budget hearings for fiscal year 22, which is slated to begin on October 1st, to consider expanding it. At this point, I think we've kind of talked about how we've been, our intention has been to focus on our bread and butter. That has been on the deck over. At the same time, we absolutely welcome improvements all along North Capitol. And the way that we've approached that is through our interaction with the different civic associations. When we interact with Hanover and Bates down towards New York Avenue, we say, guys, you've got to get out there and support. You have to come up, what do you want to see for the New York underpass? We have an idea, as blissful as this may seem, who knows, maybe they would dig out and extend the underpass and put everything underground. That's just an idea. So I think the main thing is that you have to think about each of these different communities that are along and the desire to not impose one's will on someone else for what their expectation of what is your life going to be like out in front of your house. I live right here at 1840 North Capitol Street. I experience it. I don't have off-street parking either. I fought to get parking on this street in front of my home, in front of St. Martin's Church, to get rid of the AM parking restriction because it was ludicrous and nonsensical. I got that removed from VDOT because I cared so much about having parking. So I cannot stress that enough, how parking is hugely important for us to maintain. We experienced that directly with DDOT when there was a funeral at St. Martin's Church. How can you expect to have a hearse pull up? How are you going to bring a deceased body from around the corner if you don't have parking in front of the church? So Terry talked about this, but when there's discussion about let's turn this into the Netherlands. We gave an example of Maastricht just because it was a deck-over example, but we're not trying to turn this into Amsterdam. The idea, and there's a very important points that the pastor brought up and the other young woman mentioned in terms of that ability to transit, and you need a car to get around. We are not going carless. It's important to understand that this is a trajectory that Maryland people come in, by and large, and use North Capitol. We still have to have the ability to park. This is not 14th Street. There are different sections along North Capitol, and that's the way that we presented it. You have all the way, if you're considering North Capitol Corridor, this is not a uniform area. We have residential, we have churches, you have down to government buildings, you have down all the way down to Union Station, if they are really considering looking at. That is not the same as our area. And we've made that very clear to DDOT, and they understand that. It's kind of, you have very different pockets of populations along North Capitol, and it is not uniform. So I think that's important to keep in mind. And likewise, there has been some discussion about how increasing bike traffic will be beneficial to local businesses. Well, that may be the case, but we have community organizations like churches, which do not fall into commerce. It's, so it's important to think about all these different types. We have residents, we have churches, we do have local businesses, and it's very difficult to try and accommodate all of these different needs. But I think the thing that we're all unified around is North Capitol Street is not a desirable place. You talk to anyone who is driving through here, they say, I want to drive through and get past North Capitol as quickly as possible. And we, again, as the pastor said, this is not a Pollyanna. This is, we are not trying to, have some truly aspirational view, but at the same time, we're trying to approach this as possibly a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to make improvements, not necessarily right wrongs 100%. We can't. But if you look across the country and you look at the current infrastructure bill that the Biden administration has put forward, they have carved out a section to say we need to right the wrongs of highways that were driven through. You have that, it's a cited example of the Claiborne Expressway in New Orleans. You have a cited example in St. Paul on I-90. So this is something that is being talked about. We know that we can't right all the wrongs, but we're trying to work with all the different community members along this corridor to improve it.
And just real quickly, just to add a little bit to that, in my presentation, I talked about, how we are a multi-community grassroots group, okay? And, I think it is important. I mean, the way I see this whole thing growing, and the way I see us being able to touch more individuals is through, first of all, we're working through the civic associations. So at this point, that's a key contact for people to make if they want to, work with this project, is to go to your civic association, tell them you came to this forum, you liked what you heard, but there's some more things that could be added, which we are very much aware of, and see if we can get the civic associations more energized, more interested, so that the information that we try to put out and distribute, they become some of the major distributors of it. And of course, they would also become the major critique of that information. And we need the critique, okay? Because we haven't really, I don't know, but I don't think we've went very deep into sort of what the process is, okay? But the process is, first you have a local feasibility study, And then you have to take it to the feds for several reasons. One reason because North Capitol is a U.S. highway. And the second reason is because we believe we can get probably, 85% of the funding from the feds, okay? So the feds will do another, assessment of whether this is a feasible project. In both of those, both the local assessment and the federal assessment, one of the key issues is there how much opposition is there to this project, okay? And so that's why, we are very keen on the idea of trying to build support, even though we're at the very beginning of this process now, of the assessment process.
One of the key things I just want to reiterate, and that's not only for the folks here in audience in person, but also virtually, really, I can't stress enough how important it is to fill out the questionnaire, fill out the survey, also share your email with us so that we can reach you, and also have that open communication and dialogue as well, direct, for exchange of ideas, input, and just going forward. Also, we need volunteers, so I can't stress enough. If you feel passionate about this, however, you feel, this is a great opportunity to get engaged in the community and a community effort. This is grassroots community. We're all volunteers here.
And let me just quickly add that volunteering doesn't have to look like 2 hours or every Sunday. It could look like you hear that there's the next event, and you print out some flyers and pass them out to your to your block.
Yeah.
Or if you have a block listserv, that you're the one passing the word. We talk a lot about, like you give us your information and we're going to keep it, but that's just one person. If you're interested, and it's probably not going to be popular, but whether you like it or not, we need you to get the word out to your neighbors because we need the feedback. The feedback helps us shape this. You know what I mean? It's like nobody wants to get to the finish line and then hear all the bad things. If we can hear them early, then we can figure out, is there a path that we can find together that would help us get to somewhere that looks like a safer North Capitol, or maybe not. But I think that each one of us going back to if you just take your block, just talk to your block, that would help. So yeah, there's a lot of ways to help. I don't know that I'm even on your question anymore, but.
Let's get to
Eckington.
Are you part of that Civic?
I am, yes. I'm not that involved, but I do want to thank you very much again and for your thoughtful answers to my question. I hope to get more involved.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm just going to read a question from the chat box just to get to some of those. So the question is, did you all walk or take the bus to this meeting? If you parked, will that space be available once this project is complete? What parking options will be available on North Cap, T, Todd Streets, etc.?
Well, I'll start. I was going to drive because I'm generally a driver, but I had some technical issues, so I ended up walking here today. Now, today was a good day for T Street, at least when I got here, and there were several parking spaces there. In terms of whether a parking space will be there if this project moves forward, I mean, there are a lot of variables in that I think at some point we are all just going to be guessing. I think there are two ways to look at the future. I think one of them is there's so many people moving to the district, so new people are going to bring cars, and we are going to have fewer places to put those cars and more congestion wherever those cars are driving. I think there is a different perspective from some folks who believe that the new people who are moving in are nearly all on bikes or buses, and that this is not going to be such a big deal, and we can change all the roads to accommodate folks on bikes and buses, and the cars won't really be a problem because we're going to fix it all. I think the truth is probably somewhere in the middle. And, I think anything beyond that is just a guessing game. I doubt that there are, well, I won't say I doubt, but there are a lot of us who are working on this who recognize the issue of parking, and that it is, by some of our view, a primary commodity. But we also recognize that there are other people in our community who feel very passionate as well that parking shouldn't be a priority, and we ought to be looking at other options much more aggressively, almost to the point of eliminating cars. So I think that there are these different perspectives, these combating perspectives that we're having to deal with. But that's the best I can do in terms of answering whether if I had parked, there would be a parking space when this is all said and done. I just don't know.
I think parking is going to probably be a battle. And I think people need to prepare for a battle. That means if you are concerned about maintaining parking, you're going to have to we're going to have to get organized and make the point in a very visible way that this community needs parking. But I do think it's going to probably be somewhat of a battle, because that's kind of the way DDOT is leaning these days.
But that's going to be true with this project or without. Parking is going to be a hot topic.
Yeah, I know, but
regardless.
the answer is you've got to get organized, regardless of whether you're talking about this project or in general.
Sandrine, how about yourself?
Oh, I walked. I walked across the bridge.
We're not going to ask you.
It's not too hot.
We're not going to ask you how far you walked, because I'm going to say I walked too.
I walked 1 block. 1 block, and it's a very nice day.
Wait,
it's not too hot.
I walked half a block. It's a nice, it's a nice day for walking. Yeah, but I wouldn't walk it. I mean, I wouldn't drive anyway, because it's only a half block. Well, I don't have anything to drive. I forgot my car's in the shop.
Okay. Next question, please.
Sure.
Next question, please.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Bradley Thomas. I live in the Bates area, and I'm the chairperson of ANC 5E. Now, I'm also a native Washingtonian, 4th generation. My great-grandmother was born in Washington, D.C. in 1876. Maternal great-grandmother. My paternal grandmother lived in the Bloomingdale area most of her adult life. So I appreciate and understand the historic perspective that you laid on. It was very thorough, and I do understand it completely. I'm also the author of a recently published thesis on sustainability and environmental justice. So I understand the issues that you also laid out, and in fact, there are some other issues that you didn't mention that come into play. I say all that to say that I appreciate this project. I think it's a great project, and I've supported it and will continue to do so. But I sat there and debated whether I was going to ask this question, and President Quinn kind of opened the door, as we say in trial practice. So I'm going to ask it. At the last ANC meeting on Tuesday, public meeting, a couple of representatives from the Eckington Civic Association, one of whom I believe was the president, raised some issue about an alternate proposal that they have developed. And so I didn't allow that to distract the meeting, and we just got off of that topic very quickly. But I am curious, do you as panelists know what this proposal is? What are they proposing that's different from this one?
Sure. I'll give a light answer. I mean, someone else could probably give a more detailed one if they wish. But I think the general distinction is that we are talking about taking North Capitol as it is and putting a cover over a section of it, right? What they are talking about is raising that traffic that is now in the underpass, bringing it up to grade. So all those cars, all that noise, all the emissions come straight up to the street level. They are contemplating, please correct me if I get this wrong, but I believe they're contemplating a bus lane, 2 bus lanes, and a dedicated bike lane as well, to I guess each direction.
And 3 auto lanes, one's a switch lane.
so if you can imagine it, and they're also looking to add several new stop signs, or stop lights. So it'd be kind of like if you think about, well, I know you know Florida and North Capitol, and the stretch from Florida and now North Capitol up to Florida. If you're on Florida and you're going up towards Rhode Island, you're stopping like every 2 seconds. They're imagining something, I think, a bit more severe than that, thinking that that is going to slow the traffic down if you keep having to stop and stop and stop and stop. Plus, you've reduced the number of lanes for cars. I think one of the challenges that we are contemplating is how much more difficult it becomes to cross that many lanes if you are on foot, right? And on top of all the other things that are kind of obvious in terms of the environmental issues as well. And they're looking to do this the entire stretch of North Capitol. When I say the entire stretch, I believe their estimate is from Michigan all the way up to New York. If I have those boundaries. Yeah, I said Michigan.
Massachusetts.
Massachusetts. Michigan to Massachusetts. I was still wrong. Michigan to Massachusetts. And so where we have imagined a park that, you know, that, and this is a dicey word, that connects the communities, they're imagining a park that is solely in Eckington. And I believe that's at the intersection of North Capitol and Florida,
So-
just like a little pocket park.
They would be closing off Lincoln Road to make that into a park in their proposal. That side entrance to Lincoln, as Lincoln juts off of North Capitol, would be closed to our street, and they want to make that into a community park.
And
North Capitol would run through the park.
I'm sorry. What? Exactly. And so the other piece of the plan that is different, at least by my understanding, is that they would get rid of nearly all the parking on North Capitol. So I think those are some of the major differences between the plans. I encourage you to look at that plan and get your own understanding as well. But that's kind of how we get to the debate. And so one of the things that we heard was, like I said, a couple of weeks ago, we had a discussion that was them presenting their plan, us presenting our plan, and a discussion thereafter. And one of the things that we heard was, oh, wow, some folks wanted a bit of both of the plans. Like, is that a thing that we could do? And, you know, I mean, we're open. I think right at this moment, what we're talking about is the stretch where we know we have some say. I can't go down to Bates and tell Bates, you got to put your thing underground, or you got to bring your part, section it out the same way that they've laid out. I just can't do that. I have to know that Bates is on board with what I'm suggesting is great for Bates, you know? And so that's kind of the challenge there, is that we haven't been willing to go beyond a place where we know that the communities, or at least we're having a conversation with the communities that we're going to impact. I mean, it's like we don't want to go beyond that and start talking for other people.
Yeah, and the problem is, it's just like, to some extent, we started kind of going into the weeds at this meeting, in terms of parking and, we definitely don't want to be, the source of all knowledge once you start going into the weeds for communities that we're not a part of and don't really truly understand those details, that there's got to be impetus and energy and engagement from that community. If you're going to come up with a proposal of like you say, bringing the street either to the surface or doing a deck over by Bates, Bates has centrally got to get its own community engaged in that. We don't want to take on that responsibility for communities that we, don't know
Bradley,
that well, you know.
And I think I really appreciate the question. And I think for me, from my perspective, I try to, really, focus and make the connection with the history, because I think the history is so crucial. And I tried to hit on this during my segment, that, going forward, trying to do something with what we've got, right? This legacy that, needs to be fixed. It should be fixed. It really deserves to be better, right? For all of us, all the neighbors here, is, really, that how we got here is crucial in where we go, right? And I don't want to disparage the other, proposal that's out there, but this is where I think they really fail, is that they don't know the history, and that history is North Capitol ceased being a local boulevard in the late 1940s into the 50s. It was reprioritized as a commuter thoroughfare, which it is to this day. You look at the cars traveling, zipping down North Capitol, and it's mainly out of state. And the extension of North Capitol, which happened, right? North Capitol ended at Michigan up until the 50s. Then when they plowed it through Soldiers Home, that made it a thoroughfare for Maryland folks to come down and get into the center of the city. And that reality is, we have to deal with that. And you're not going to deal with it by bringing the street up to grade. You're just going to have a highway at street grade level now, and a lot more of congestion and traffic on your hands.
I think also there were several remarks that I included in my presentation that were basically in response to the other study without saying they were in response to the other study. But I think in addition to the history, I think the other study really is real short on the social justice kind of perspective, okay, and real heavy on the engineering part of it, and paying relatively little attention to the quality of life issues that, people are affected. It's not just about building a road that carries people effectively and efficiently. It's also about how the building of that road impacts the quality of life that people experience. And that, that's just sort of my critique.
Did we cover all your
Yeah. So one of the things that's carved on the FDR Memorial is a statement that what is past is prologue. So I appreciate what you've done here. I appreciate what you all have done. It's been a great presentation, and you did answer my question. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And did you have a question? I saw you raising your hand.
Wait, this gentleman back here had his.
Okay.
He's been standing for a long time.
All right. Yeah, please.
I'm getting hungry.
How's everyone? My name is Carlos Duggar. I live across the street at 1913. I've been here since I was 7 years old. My dad and mom moved here. I have 3 generations of Duggar. One live in this block, one live in the 1800 block, which my uncle died last year. They sold the house. And then one lives in the next block. All 3 of them are brothers. We wound up here. I'm going to make that short, and then I'm going to leave mine alone. We wound up here because one of the uncles' wife died on Christmas Eve, like 1968, 67, 68. So a brother that worked at Giant here in the 1800 block, he had the other 2 brothers come up for like a couple of months during the summer. I was wondering like where my dad at and my uncle at, but they was up here getting jobs at Giant Food through my uncle. They all did over 30 years, retired. They're all deceased. All 3 of them are deceased. Like I said, the house in the middle was sold. We still own our home, and that 3rd house down the street they still own. To make that story to where I'm coming to is that I've been here since I've been a kid, so I watched the community come up. When I started here, we had playgrounds, we had rec centers, we had activities for the kids, we had summer jobs for the kids. I did a summer job on the marriage program, summer program, wound up getting sent to a clerical school early, wound up working for the government on the Carter administration. When I was like 15, 16, 17, I went in the Marine Corps. So I got a chance to travel and see the world and see interaction with other races and things like that. So I'm abreast to understanding race and how to interact with other races. Some of us we get along with, some of us we don't. But for the most part, we do get along with each other. Most of us get along with one another. Most of us get along with one another. But I was saying that to say my mom is one of the oldest. She's 86, one of the oldest members still living here on North Capitol. So I watched the community go down where the drug activity took over, where you couldn't even walk out here. Even if you lived here, you had to be careful walking around here and things you had to do. So watching the community come back up, and when I look at the project about the system being systemic racism and where it happened, where it came up. Now I understand a lot, even though some of those things I did not know until I saw it today. I haven't pulled up the history report on DC, why this street was here, or even though my uncle had old pictures of when they used to have big yards all out front. But that to say is, to see the community change and coming up to part, I think you guys have done an excellent job to present to the first forum I've been to. So I get information because Sandria lives next door. But when it comes to your flyers, when I was a kid, people had flyers to be posted out. They would come and get you like, hey, I'm going to pay you $1 an hour or whatever. I'm going to drop you off in this block, and you do this whole block, and you do this whole block, and they just stick them on the customer's door. And that gave me incentive to want to do a little work even as a little kid. But to make the story, I just think y'all have done an excellent job as far as presentation. Me, myself, I get it. I get it that people don't have, I have parking around back, so, and I still have issues with parking because I still got family and friends who come by who wants to park. So my thing was, in all of this work of parking, I'm mainly concerned about parking myself because I know people who live that don't have a back. Trash can can't even come out there. You got to put it out front. So there's a lot of things that are happening when they do, not just for parking, but not even having property in the back to walk in your own space. I was wondering in all this proposal, do they even have a suggestion, say like with the Minister Coleman, Pastor Coleman. I've been to his church several times. They have a little small parking lot on the side. I didn't know what are the budgets, when y'all have your church meetings with them, what are the chances of increasing their parking space or helping them increase their parking space since you're taking up some of their space out front? So that was my thing when it came to parking. I don't even know what to even suggest about parking, unless there's some kind of way that they can build extra parking somewhere where at least some of the residents that live here that don't have parking can have a space to park. Whether they build it along at a high-rise parking only for that community, I don't know, but that's my suggestion with that. But overall, I think you all have done an outstanding job as far as your presentation. I understand it very well as much as I could. I know there's a lot of in-depth stuff, but I really appreciate what you all have presented, and I think you did an excellent job.
Mr. Duggar, thank you for those comments and that little bit of history. I think if any of us in this room can figure out how to create some new parking, we're going to be real rich. So I think it's going to be a challenge just to keep the parking that exists right now, let alone to try to figure some new. And I think the best idea I think I've had over the years with regard to church parking in particular is I was trying to get people on board with this idea of the churches working together and having what would essentially be like a little bus shuttle situation that would go from church to church, dropping people off to and from a centralized parking space. And so I think one of the ideas we had was, could we get some parking on Sundays from Howard? I don't remember, because the last time we talked about that was probably like 7 years ago, so I don't remember where that died off. But the tighter and tighter parking gets, the more creative we're going to have to get with regard to what to do. Because I don't think a lot of us in this community really want to see our churches stay. I mean, I'm speaking specifically to churches because I know you brought it up. But we're going to have to get creative. I mean, I don't know what else to do at this point.
Well, and we got to have to get political now. Mr. Thomas over here, who chairs the ANC I'm a member of, and Terry Janine here, who chairs BCA, will tell you that every building that has been built anywhere close to this area that has, 7, 8, 10 stories, I always request that they be required to have underground parking, and that 1/3 of that underground parking should be reserved for public parking. And politically, I could never get the votes to get that included in the, in the resolution of support. But I will continue to do that, and maybe one day everybody will, see the light. But I do think that is an option. And there's no everybody else does underground parking. I know it's expensive, but everybody else gets money for it and builds their building. I just think it's, they still see this as kind of a cheap neighborhood and they want to build a building on the cheap. So anyway, that is another option.
Thank you, Bertha, and thank you so much for your question.
You guys, like I said again, did a great job. I enjoyed it. I'll be back to the next one.
Mr. Duggar, next time bring somebody with you.
I did. My neighbors are with me.
All right, okay.
Also, we have a book that Paul and I have co-written on the history of Bloomingdale, and it starts at 1800 to 20. It's been updated to 2019, I guess. And if you could drop off, if Kirby, if you could have a sign-in sheet or a sheet that says for people that want a copy of the book, I just need your name and your address.
Okay.
Yeah, and one of the things actually, just a future activity, we were going to save this for the conclusion, but I'll just mention it right now, is our next community event is a walking tour. So it's going to involve a lot of the history that I talked to at the front end, and then it's going to take you around where we're proposing the deck over, so you can actually see what's there now, and then visualize what can be at all the critical points around where we're proposing the deck over. In Bloomingdale and Eckington, it crosses both sides, it interweaves across the chasm and around, and it goes up to All Nations, it crosses the Rhode Island Bridge, and then comes down on this side. And it touches on the environment all the different aspects that we had talked to in the presentation today, but you're there on the site. So we really try to make that connection as well. Are there any other questions? Because you guys have been so gracious, and we want to make sure we covered anybody. If anybody has any questions, sure.
So what we think right now is that the city is going to consider, so that the money that has been allocated is for a feasibility study of the North Capitol deck over. So that's money that we advocated for and secured. But when you do something like that, they also, if this is ever going to go anywhere, you have to consider an alternative. And since at the moment that seems to be the only thing that is on the table, that will be an alternative that they will consider. That is not to say that if there is another idea, they wouldn't also include that. But I mean, they're not going to include 50. But you know what I mean? It's going to have to be something realistic and that seems relatively developed. And so that is something that they will be looking at. But I will remind you that the name of the study is a feasibility study of the North Capitol deck over. So that's not to say that we are sure that they are going to find that this is feasible. It's just that that is the primary focus, and they are also studying other things, as well as just overall, I think whether this moves forward or not, you can expect that the district is at least thinking seriously about making some safety-oriented changes along North Capitol. So something is going to happen. And I think that was going to be my final point, because I believe we're about to close out, at least I hope so. My final point
TJ,
is...
you're not supposed to say that.
I know, but at this hour, I should have had breakfast, clearly. But I think my last point is, we've heard some support, and we certainly have heard some critiques. What I encourage you to do is please take the time to look at the plan closely. And what we need to hear from you is if there's something about it that you wish was there, if there's something different that you think would work better, give us that feedback. We need to hear, yes, it's great to get a pat on the back, that we love it, but if there's something that would make this space feel more welcoming to you, and I think that's kind of the eye I want you to look at this through. When you're looking at it, is this a space that I'd feel like, oh, somebody was thinking of me when they did this? That's kind of, it's kind of like when I go to the Bloomingdale farmers market, I tell people I don't really feel welcome there. That is not to say that the farmers market doesn't want me there. It's that when I'm in that environment, I don't think anybody was thinking about, you know, a black woman like me showing up there to shop. And so I think what we're trying to do is creating a space where all of us will feel welcome and that all of us will ultimately use, so that the space ends up looking like the community as opposed to just a segment of the community. So that's my last point.
Yeah. Yeah, I just want to address your question regarding the walking tour. It is scheduled for October 16th, so that's Saturday, October 16th, with a rain date for the following Saturday, October 23rd. So look out for announcements and details that will be on the listserv, Scott's blog. We're going to do our website, social, and then printed flyers. So we are going to do another round of printed flyers and flyering around the neighborhood on lampposts, stores, businesses, churches. So we're going to try and really just build on what we've been doing in that regard. And another thing I could just not emphasize enough is a great way for you to, make your voice heard, get involved in your civic association, attend the meetings, and let them know how you feel and what's important to you as well at their meetings. Bring this up, because this is going to be, it's a crucial vehicle for you to make your voice heard, and I can't express enough how important that is.
Could I just add one other
ahead.
thing? I want, Terry Terry talked a bit more about the process, and I did want to emphasize the decision makers, the final decision makers are not going to be us. The final decision makers are going to be the people that have the money, which means that's going to be DDOT and the feds, Federal Department of Transportation. All we can do is try to make the best case for what we want and to demonstrate that there is support for that best case, okay? So I wanted to say that because I kind of sense that when people ask me questions and I would say it's too early to tell you what the answer to that question is, that is why. Because we aren't the decision makers. And we have not really started negotiating with DDOT on anything, because they, the study has been, we're still waiting for it to get through all the reviews, the federal review of the budget and all of that. And then it takes another month for the money to get loaded into the computer. And once it's loaded in the computer, then they can start spending it. But I do think it's important that people understand, who the decision makers are. And we do need their input so so that we and you and everybody else can advocate as much as possible in terms of what it is they do want.
And I appreciate that, and that makes a lot of sense. I'm very thankful that John asked the question about the alternative proposal, because again, that shows the divide. That's where the opportunity is. If you can find a way to get to the middle, some common ground, it will make for a stronger proposal for whatever it is to support all our communities, right? So I'm going to do my part and reach out to the Atkinson Civic Associates and see what's going on, because if they have an alternate plan that's just it sounds like it's like this right now, that's not going to meet the mission really of what they're trying to do. So, and I'm all for community. I really believe in the word and what it represents. I don't like to use it just to use it. And if you can't find a meeting in the middle, it just falls flat. So, I look forward to
Thank you for that. And just to clarify, though, the other proposal for North Capitol isn't an Eckington Civic Association proposal. It's a proposal that's sponsored by the president of the Civic Association and another person in Eckington. So it's not an officially endorsed Eckington Civic Association proposal, just to clarify. Yeah. So get involved because they may be looking to endorse it. But I want to thank everybody because we are way over, and thank you all for hanging in there and sticking it out. One quick announcement, Zach.
Yes, I just wanted to do a shout out for Art All Night, which is tonight, and it's on here on North Capitol. And it's a great event, and it starts at 7 p.m., and it should be lots of fun. So everyone should hit Art All Night tonight.
And I just want to also thank Father Kelly and St. Martin's Catholic Church for allowing us to host this meeting here in the Pioneer Room. They are super gracious, and a definite shout out to Paul at Spark Street Digital for providing us all this technology for today. We couldn't have done this meeting without Paul, so thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.